Welcome, dear subscribers and curious listeners of my channel. For all its richness and originality, J.K. Rowling's magical system can sometimes seem odd. At times it makes you scratch your head, at others it's downright hilarious. So today, let's examine a few spells and magical mechanisms that begin to fall apart under closer inspection. Let's dive into these curious inconsistencies together. Enjoy the video and a touch of friendly irony. Section 1, Lily Potter's Protective Charm. One of the most emotional and powerful moments in the entire saga is Lily Potter's sacrifice. Her love became a shield that stopped Voldemort cold. According to Dumbledore, this ancient magic of love was so potent it placed a protection on Harry, one that even Avada Kedavra couldn't break. But here's the question. Was Lily really the only person in the entire wizarding world who sacrificed themselves out of love? Surely there were other parents willing to die for their children, so why only Lily? Was there some unique ritual involved, or is it possible that Dumbledore left a few details out? Section 2, the Marauder's Map Spells. The Marauder's Map is an incredible artifact created by teenage boys. James, Sirius, Remus, and Peter. It shows everyone's location within Hogwarts, even their movements in real time. But this raises a ton of questions. Why hasn't anything like it ever been replicated? The Ministry could have used something similar for security. Aurors would love a tool like this, so 4 teenagers invented magical GPS that no adult ever managed to reproduce. Were they actually geniuses on par with Dumbledore? And the biggest question, what is the spell based on? If it reads magical signatures, why isn't this tech used everywhere? Or was it a one-time magical fluke no one could reproduce? Section 3, the Dark Mark. The Dark Mark is the symbol of the Death Eaters bound to their skin by Voldemort. He could use it to summon his followers. Sounds powerful. But the more you think about it, the stranger it gets. First of all, why would you design a mark that can't be hidden? It's basically proof of criminal activity. Imagine a wizard walking into a Ministry job interview with that on his arm. Second, Voldemort couldn't summon followers unless one of them was nearby. Who thought that was a good idea? Why not use enchanted tokens or, I don't know, magical owls? And finally, was there really no way to remove it? The Order of the Phoenix had brilliant wizards, and not one of them could figure it out. Section 4, Molly Weasley's Unknown Spell. In one of the most dramatic moments of the final battle, Molly Weasley destroys Bellatrix Lestrange. But what exactly did she use? In the film, it looks like disintegration. In the book, the spell hits her heart, and her face freezes in her final emotion. But what spell was that? If it kills just as instantly as Avada Kedavra, why isn't it considered one of the unforgivables? So, if you're angry and protecting your kids, it's allowed. But if you're wearing a black cloak and look spooky, you're a criminal. Where exactly is the line between protection and dark magic? Section 5, Expelliarmus. Now, the king of school duels. The spell that made Harry famous, Expelliarmus. As simple as a wand flick, but oddly slow if you remember how Snape pronounced it. Seriously, in Chamber of Secrets he says it so slowly you could boil a kettle in the meantime. Why didn't anyone shorten the disarming spell to something like zap or stop? For a spell that often decides the outcome of a duel, it's surprisingly inefficient. And yet, Harry built his entire combat style around it. It's his magical calling card. Section 6, Transfiguration and its moral loopholes. Transfiguration is one of the most advanced branches of magic. It allows you to turn one thing into another, not just physically, but, apparently, with life involved. Example, a chair becomes mice, but are those mice alive? Do they feel things, have memories, instincts? If so, does that mean wizards are creating living beings out of nothing? Or is it all just an illusion? If transfiguration does create life, doesn't that raise some serious ethical concerns? What happens to those creatures afterward? Do they revert to objects or vanish into nothingness? It's genuinely disturbing if you think about it. Section 7, Accio, the summoner of oddities. And finally, the famous Accio, a wonderful little spell that brings any object straight to your hand. Harry used it to summon his broom during the Triwizard Tournament. Great stuff, but does it work across hundreds of meters? With no distance limit? What if there were two identical brooms in Hogwarts? Which one would he get? How does the spell know exactly what you meant? And the wildest moment, Newt Scamander summons a Niffler, a living creature. So, can you summon people too? So what stopped Voldemort from shouting Accio Potter and solving all his problems in 5 seconds flat? Number 8, Imperious Curse. Imperio, said Moody during a defense against the dark arts lesson in Goblet of Fire. One by one he cast the curse on students. They danced on tables, performed tricks, laughed in fear. But when it was Harry's turn, something shifted. He fought it, Moody said, amazed. A 4th year resisted one of the darkest spells known to wizardkind. No special training, no aura badge, just instinct. If a schoolboy can do that, why hasn't the Ministry created defenses? Why don't Aurors learn mental shields, exercises, resistance techniques? There's no official protocol, just blind hope you'll be strong enough. Voldemort had armies, fear, power, access to the inner workings of the wizarding government. So why didn't he use the Imperious Curse on everyone who mattered? On Scrimgeour, on the Wizengamot, on the goblins. In Deathly Hallows we learn that he used it on Pious Thickness, placing him as Minister for Magic. But even that seems too small. One man, one puppet? The spell takes no effort, no ritual, no rare materials, just a word. Why wasn't every courtroom, every newspaper office filled with Imperious agents? Maybe the real spell Voldemort overlooked was strategy. Or maybe the books didn't dare explore the full horror of what Imperio could truly mean. Number 9, Reparo, whispered Hermione, pointing her wand at Harry's broken glasses in Philosopher's Stone. The lenses knit themselves back together instantly, no scratches, no cracks, as if nothing had ever happened. The spell seemed like magic in its purest form, simple, clean, miraculous. But if Reparo really restores things so perfectly, then why do wizards bother with glue, nails, or repairs at all? Why did Arthur Weasley spend hours tinkering with his flying Ford Anglia instead of fixing it with a flick? Why do wizard homes crumble, leak, or fall apart if one word can undo all damage? And what are the spell's limits? If it works on glass and furniture, can it restore magical objects too? In Deathly Hallows, Harry's wand snaps, not cracked, broken. Yet even the brilliant Hermione can't fix it with Reparo. Only the Elder Wand, the most powerful wand in existence, manages to restore it. I'm putting you right, Harry tells it, almost reverently. So what's the rule here? If Reparo can't fix something, is it truly broken, or just beyond ordinary magic? And if that's the case, then maybe Reparo isn't a miracle after all. Maybe it's just a clever illusion full of promise but empty when it matters most. Number 10, Obliviate. Obliviate, said Gilderoy Lockhart with a smile, aiming his wand at Harry and Ron. He looked confident, polished, proud. Seconds later, his spell backfired, and his memory was wiped clean. In Chamber of Secrets, that moment is played for laughs. But what actually happened was terrifying. Lockhart didn't just forget one detail, he forgot who he was, everything, his name, his past, his skills. One miscast spell, and his entire identity vanished. If that's possible, then what exactly does Obliviate do? Is it surgical or chaotic? Does it trim memory like a haircut or burn the whole thing down? The implications are massive. Arthur Weasley uses Obliviate on muggles who see flying cars. The Ministry does it routinely, but if a single spell can delete entire chapters of thought, why isn't it considered dangerous? Why isn't it locked behind training, licenses, or restrictions? More disturbingly, why hasn't anyone thought of using it on dark wizards? What if Dumbledore had used it on young Tom Riddle? Wiped the orphanage out of his mind? Rewrote the ending before it began? Maybe the real danger isn't the spell, but the fact that no one questions who gets to use it or why. Number 11, levicorpus. Levicorpus! The word hit the air like a whip in Half-Blood Prince, and suddenly Ron dangled upside down by one ankle, flailing like a fish on a hook. Harry stood frozen, wand still raised, stunned by how easily the spell had worked. He'd read it in the margins of the Half-Blood Prince's textbook, never expecting it to do that. The image was almost comedic, but only almost, because while the books treat levicorpus like a prank, it raises some very real questions about the body. Being yanked into the air by your leg should hurt. Veins compress. Blood rushes to the head. In the real world, 5 minutes like that could cause unconsciousness, or worse. Yet no one in the story ever complains of dizziness or pain, not even Snape, who created the spell. It was a favourite, Sirius once said, describing how James Potter used it on him. Favourite! That sounds less like dueling and more like humiliation. So why is a spell this physically invasive treated like a joke? A full-body levitation by the ankle, without warning, without control, should count as magical assault. Worse still, there are no rules, no ministry regulation, no classroom warning. Levicorpus isn't even listed as dark magic, despite being one of the very spells young Snape stuffed into his personal spellbook of vengeance. Meanwhile, something like Rictus Sempra, a tickling charm, is taught with caution in Dueling Club. What determines the danger level of a spell in the wizarding world? Intent? Damage? Popularity? With Levicorpus, the damage may not be visible, but the message is loud and clear. Magic doesn't need blood to be violent. Number 12, Apparition. Apparition is introduced as elite magic, dangerous, advanced, and highly useful. Disapparate from danger, they say. But when real danger comes, no one seems to use it. In Deathly Hallows, during the attack on the wedding at the Burrow, Harry, Ron, and Hermione literally run, through a crowd, past curses, into the unknown. Why not just apparate instantly to a safe house? They all passed their tests. Hermione's brilliant, Ron's capable, Harry's... well, Harry. And yet they bolt like muggles in a storm. Either the rules of apparition are far more fragile than we're told, or the logic simply cracks under pressure. And what about splinching? It's built up as a terrifying consequence. Left his bloody arm behind, we're told about one unfortunate wizard. But when Ron is splinched in Deathly Hallows, it's a scratch. A painful one, yes, but fixed within minutes. There's no panic, no hospitalization. Hermione wraps it up, mutters a spell, and they move on. If that's the worst-case scenario, why all the fear? Why do students tremble at the thought? And why isn't every trained wizard taught to memorize dozens of safe destinations? Imagine a pocket guide of apparition-ready coordinates for emergencies. It would have saved Fred, Tonks, and countless others. Then there's the strange invisibility. Wizards apparate in public, on streets, in forests, right outside Gringotts. And yet no muggle ever notices. They just vanish, the narration often says. But how? Is there an automatic concealment charm? Does the soundless pop go unnoticed in a busy world? If not, then why doesn't the statute of secrecy crumble daily? Apparition is fast, powerful, and apparently invisible, but only when convenient. The rest of the time it's forgotten, left unused, like a lifeboat no one boards during a shipwreck. Number 13, Petrificus Totalis. Petrificus Totalis! Hermione yelled, her voice sharp with urgency. Neville Longbottom stiffened at once, falling to the ground like a toppled statue. His arms clamped to his sides, his legs snapped together, and his eyes, wide with panic, were the only things that moved. It happened in Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, right before the trio left for the trapdoor. The moment felt almost funny until you really thought about it. Neville was completely immobilized. Couldn't speak, couldn't move, couldn't even cry out. Was he breathing? The book doesn't say. Neville lay where he was, flat on his back looking like a statue. That line, quiet and simple, hides something terrifying. What happens inside the body when it's magically frozen like that? Can the lungs expand? Do you stay conscious the entire time, trapped inside your own skin? If Hermione had taken longer to reverse the spell, what would have happened to Neville? Would he have passed out from lack of oxygen? Would he have choked in silence? The more this spell appears, the stranger it becomes. In The Half-Blood Prince, when Death Eaters attack Hogwarts, students are hit with paralysis and left lying around the castle. What if someone collapsed in the snow under a crumbling wall or face down in the lake? The spell doesn't adapt. It doesn't shield or protect. It just freezes and forgets. There's no mention of magical safeguards, no warning label, just another charm in a kid's dueling kit, and yet Petrificus Totalis isn't considered dark magic, not illegal, not even restricted. A spell that takes away someone's freedom completely, that silences the body while the mind remains alert. It's taught in first-year defense against the dark arts. Imagine casting it on someone for hours, for days. Isn't that torture? Isn't that imprisonment without a trial? But no one in the ministry seems to care. As long as it's done with a wand and a Latin word, anything goes. Number 14, Incendio. Incendio, Hermione shouted during the Quidditch match in Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. A sudden burst of flame shot toward Professor Snape's robes, distracting him just long enough for Harry to regain control of his broom. The spell worked like a miniature flamethrower, fast, intense, and powerful. But that same spell in other scenes produces nothing more than a flicker or a few sparks. How is it possible that one incantation without any visible modifier ranges from lighting a cozy hearth to becoming a potential weapon? There's no clear explanation in the books. Incendio appears again in the Goblet of Fire, when Harry uses it during the Triwizard Tournament to ignite a bush and distract a dragon. Once again, a full flame erupts from his wand, but in smaller domestic scenes, when wizards light candles or fireplaces, the result is far gentler. It's almost as if the spell reads the user's mood. Does Incendio scale with intent, with magical skill? If so, that's never stated. No teacher explains that difference to students, not even Flitwick. This brings up a darker thought. Why are students taught this spell in the first place? If Incendio can launch fire powerful enough to scare off a Hungarian horntail, why isn't it restricted? Even Fred and George Weasley, known for their love of chaos, were never scolded for misuse of it. Could a student, in anger or fear, accidentally set a classmate ablaze? And if they did, what then? Would it be treated like a prank or a magical felony? There are no rules, no written code, and just a spark and silence. In a world where magic has laws for everything from cauldron thickness to apparition licenses, it's odd that fire conjuring is left unregulated. The same spell that lights the Gryffindor common room fireplace can also destroy a library. Could someone, in theory, burn down the entire restricted section with one careless flick? The idea isn't far-fetched, and yet the ministry doesn't bat an eye. Incendio, harmless charm, or dangerous oversight? The answer seems buried in the ashes. Number 15, Legilimency and Occlumency. Of all the branches of magical study, few are as unsettling and as fascinating as Legilimency and Occlumency. These twin arts deal not with potions or spells cast outward, but with the mind itself, reading thoughts, uncovering buried memories, and erecting defenses within the fortress of one's own consciousness. They are not illusions or metaphors, they are real disciplines, practiced by some of the darkest and most secretive figures in the wizarding world. But what makes these arts so elusive, so rare, and yet so desperately powerful? Legilimency, often misunderstood as simple mind-reading, is in truth a far more complex and invasive process. It is not about plucking idle thoughts as they float to the surface. True legilimency dives deeper into the very essence of memory, perception, and even emotion. Severus Snape once used it with chilling efficiency against Harry Potter. A single glance, a subtle shift in expression, and Harry's most private feelings, his fears, his love for Cho Chang, his deepest insecurities, were exposed. Snape described it coldly. The mind is not a book to be opened at will and examined at leisure. Yet he opened Harry's mind again and again as if rifling through drawers that Harry had never meant to unlock. But not everyone can wield this power. The question of who can become a Legilimens is one that has never been definitively answered, either in the textbooks or the tales passed down through generations of magical families. Lord Voldemort, the most fearsome dark wizard of the age, was a master of the art. His red eyes seemed to pierce not just the room, but the soul itself. And then there was Queenie Goldstein in the 1920s, a character from a different time, but just as adept. Her legilimency functioned differently. Hers was softer, more intuitive, as if she simply felt a person's truth without violence or command. How could both possess the same skill and yet wield it so differently? This inconsistency points to something crucial. Legilimency may not be a spell learned by rote, but a gift refined by training, or a skill that only certain minds can truly grasp. Much like Parseltongue, which only a few can master, legilimency may demand not only magical strength, but also a natural inclination and instinctual openness to the currents of other people's minds. Snape's mastery came from years of discipline and emotional restraint. Voldemort's came from his obsessive desire for control. Queenie's perhaps from her deep empathy. The art bends to the user. The act itself is not always dramatic. It can be quiet, subtle, unnoticed. There is no flash of light, no sound of impact. When Voldemort penetrated Harry's mind, it was often through dreams, visions, feelings of rage or elation that weren't Harry's own. The connection between them, forged through Harry's scar, made him a natural Legilimens's victim. "He's got inside you," Dumbledore told him. "You've got to learn to shut him out." But how? That brings us to occlumency, the discipline meant to block exactly such intrusion. At its core, occlumency is not about hiding thoughts. It is about control. To master occlumency, a wizard must control not just their thoughts, but their feelings, their memories, their very perception of self. When Snape tried to teach Harry, he didn't ask him to memorize spells. He demanded something much harder, emotional discipline. And Harry failed, not because he lacked magical power, but because he could not tame his grief, his rage, his longing for his parents, or his mistrust of Snape. It is important to understand what is being closed in occlumency, not just thoughts. Thoughts are fleeting. Memories are the true battleground. The mind, especially a young or troubled one, is a chaos of feeling. Memories surge forward when touched, not by logic, but by emotion. A simple word, a scent, a sudden pang of loss. Any of these can unlock a door a Legilimens can then walk through. Snape, in teaching Harry, demanded he suppress these instincts, bury the triggers. "Clear your mind," he repeated again and again. But for a boy like Harry, traumatized, impulsive, and burdened by a connection to Voldemort, it was near impossible. Harry's failure, however, raises a deeper question. If occlumency is so important, if it truly protects the soul itself, why is it not taught more broadly? Why is it not part of the standard Hogwarts curriculum? One might think a school of magic would prioritize protecting students from the most intimate form of magical attack. But occlumency requires a level of emotional maturity and detachment that most teenagers do not possess. It is a difficult, often painful process. Even Snape, with all his control, was visibly disturbed when Harry broke into his own memories during a lesson, memories of humiliation, of childhood trauma, of Lily. There is also a political element to consider. The Ministry of Magic, so concerned with secrecy and control, should logically require its employees, particularly auras, unspeakables, and high-ranking officials, to be trained in occlumency. Yet we see little evidence of this. Perhaps this is by design. An organization that relies on hierarchy and manipulation might not want its members shielded from every form of influence. Control is easier when minds are open. It is no coincidence that those who wield legilimency most successfully, Voldemort, Snape, Queenie, are outsiders in one way or another. They do not fit comfortably into society's molds. They are not conformists. Their mastery comes not just from power, but from pain. They understand human weakness because they have lived it, and so they exploit it. That is what makes legilimency so dangerous. It is not about reading minds. It is about knowing people better than they know themselves. Number 16, Animagus transformation. There is a special kind of magic in the wizarding world that has always fascinated both witches and wizards. Animagus transformation. The idea of shifting your very body into that of an animal, a perfect functioning creature of instinct and form, is as ancient as magic itself. Few forms of spellwork offer such a profound fusion of man and beast. Professor Minerva McGonagall becomes a silver tabby cat, elegant and composed. Sirius Black takes the form of a great black dog, massive and foreboding. Peter Pettigrew, scuttling in shadows, lives for years as a filthy rat. Animagia is one of the most thrilling forms of transfiguration, yet it's cloaked in mystery, often misunderstood, and alarmingly unregulated. To begin with, the fact that animagus transformation requires registration with the Ministry of Magic is often overlooked. The law is simple. Every registered animagus is catalogued in the official registry. Their animal form, markings, and identifying features are all recorded, and yet this law is largely symbolic. Enforcement is a nightmare. Peter Pettigrew, after betraying the Potters, disappeared and lived for over a decade as Scabbers, the Weasley family's pet rat. Scabbers has been in the family for ages, Ron says in Prisoner of Azkaban, and nobody thought twice. Not even Albus Dumbledore, the greatest wizard of his time, suspected a rat of being a Death Eater in hiding. That raises a chilling question. If someone like Pettigrew could deceive the magical world for so long, how many other unregistered animagi walk among wizards and muggles alike? Animagia offers the perfect cover for spies, criminals and fugitives. Why hasn't the Ministry developed a reliable detection method? Is it because the transformation is so total, so flawless, that it fools not just human eyes but magical ones too? In Scabbers' case, even a magical object like the Marauder's map identified him, but the power of the transformation itself concealed his true identity from all else. The physical mechanics of animagus transformation are equally perplexing. When Sirius Black became Padfoot, he retained his mind, his human thoughts, reasoning, and even his emotions. He broke into Hogwarts disguised as a dog, slipping past defenses and auras. In Order of the Phoenix, he escaped surveillance by transforming in the shadows. If a wizard can transform into a bird, could they fly across continents unnoticed? If one becomes a flea, could they hide on another creature's back, vanishing from all detection? The possibilities are staggering and the implications dangerous. Sirius himself remarks how his animagus form helped him resist the influence of Dementors. They couldn't see me. Dogs aren't affected the same way humans are. This isn't just a disguise, it's armor against the darkest magic. In Azkaban, where hope dies and memories rot, Sirius found a loophole in the system, an escape clause written in primal magic. He turned into a dog and survived where others crumbled. That is no minor feat. And yet he never formally registered. Why would he? Registration would have ensured his execution. Even more curious is how the body ages during these transformations. Does an animagus continue to grow older while in animal form, or is the process suspended like a stasis field? If Pettigrew lived over 10 years as a rat, did he age at a rat's speed or a man's? The average rat lives about 3 years. Pettigrew survived far beyond that, which implies he retained his human aging process. But how? His rat body didn't decay. Did his internal magic preserve him? If that's the case, could an animagus theoretically extend their lifespan by staying in animal form most of the time? What's even more fascinating is that no clear answer is ever given. Rowling leaves this ambiguity open, perhaps intentionally, yet it opens the door to endless speculation. What if old wizards fearful of death spent their last decades as tortoises, drawing out time in slow, deliberate motion? What if someone turned into a phoenix-like creature, healing their wounds as Fawkes does and living for centuries? And why, then, aren't more wizards becoming animagi? If the transformation offers stealth, protection, and perhaps even escape from physical decline, why aren't there hundreds, thousands of registered forms? The answer may lie in the process itself. Becoming an animagus is not a spell taught in fourth-year charms. It is an arduous, dangerous ritual requiring deep magical skill and unwavering discipline. It involves holding a mandrake leaf in your mouth for a month, creating a potion with deadly ingredients, and performing transfigurations at precisely timed lunar cycles. A single mistake can result in disaster. A failed transformation may leave a person half beast, permanently trapped in some grotesque form. McGonagall, one of the few known registered animagi, succeeded only because she was an unparalleled student of transfiguration. Her cat form is so complete that she even bears spectacle-like markings around her eyes. Sirius and James Potter, for their part, learned the transformation in secret while still students, mastering it only through intense study and mutual support. It was not a casual decision, but a calculated plan to accompany Remus Lupin during his monthly transformations into a werewolf. Which brings us to a curious crossover. What is the link between animagia and lycanthropy? Remus Lupin was born a human and bitten as a child. He becomes a beast not by choice, but by curse. Animagi, by contrast, retain full control of their minds. They are not consumed by instinct. This is crucial. Animagi do not become animals mentally, even if they acquire the abilities of their chosen form. Sirius, as Padfoot, is still Sirius inside. He is capable of strategy, of recognition, of emotional response. That mental continuity is both a blessing and a curse. Imagine being trapped in a weak animal's body, still thinking as a human. That was Pettigrew's fate. He lived in fear and filth, his dignity destroyed, gnawing crumbs and hiding beneath furniture. But he chose that life. The question is, why didn't more Death Eaters do the same? Why didn't they all scatter as mice, birds, insects, avoiding Azkaban, fleeing justice? Number 17. House Elf Magic. House Elf magic is one of the most enigmatic and underestimated forces in the wizarding world. Cloaked in servitude, hidden behind rags and obedience, it exists on the margins of society, silent, potent, and largely unexplored. Yet its very nature defies the limitations of human spellcasting, operating by a set of rules no wizard seems to fully understand, let alone control. When Harry first meets Dobby, the little elf does not appear threatening. On the contrary, he is timid, squeaky, and willing to injure himself for speaking out. But beneath the nervous bows and anxious glances lies a power that challenges the very structure of magical hierarchy. Dobby doesn't use a wand. He doesn't chant incantations. Still, he performs feats that would stun a seasoned aura. He levitates cakes, disapparates from wizard-protected areas, and can even stun a fully grown wizard without much effort. The most startling moment comes in Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, when Dobby casually reveals that he knows about the hidden room of requirement, something even the Marauders missed during their years of map-making. Dobby knows, sir. Dobby heard tell of it from the other elves, sir. This isn't just eavesdropping. It implies a connection to Hogwarts itself, a bond more intimate than that of any human inhabitant. House elves don't simply live in the castle, they are part of its living structure. Their magic goes where wizardry cannot. It is often mentioned that Hogwarts is protected against apparition and disapparition. Even Albus Dumbledore, the most powerful wizard of the age, must travel on foot or through secret passages. Yet Creature and Dobby both pop in and out of the castle grounds without restriction. You can't apparate or disapparate inside the Hogwarts grounds, Hermione reminds everyone. Except house elves can. No one explains why, no one asks how. It simply happens. And then there is the Department of Magical Transportation's silence on the matter. Portkeys and flu networks are heavily regulated by the Ministry of Magic. Apparition requires a license, and splinching is a risk even for trained wizards. But house elves, they teleport across continents without consequence or paperwork. Dobby, in The Goblet of Fire, transports Winky and himself out of the Quidditch World Cup chaos instantly. Creature, similarly, can vanish from the middle of a wizard duel. There's no magical trace, no limitations, no laws applied. These are not isolated incidents. In the Deathly Hallows, when the trio is trapped in the Malfoy Manor dungeon, it is Dobby who saves them. Not through brute force or wand-waving heroics, but through swift, silent intervention. He disarms wizards, rescues prisoners, and does it all under the nose of Bellatrix Lestrange. The elf dies for it, but not before changing the course of the war. How many wizards could claim the same? Despite this, house elf magic is not taught, studied, or even properly documented. Hogwarts offers classes in nearly every magical discipline, from transfiguration to divination, but nowhere is there mention of elf magic 101. One could argue it's because elves are born with their own brand of magic, unrelated to human systems. But that only raises more questions. If their magic is innate, it must be governed by its own logic, its own philosophy. And if that's true, why has no one attempted to learn from them? Perhaps the answer lies in fear or in control. Magic in the wizarding world is more than a skill. It's a symbol of status. Wizards rule not because they are the only magical beings, but because they claim dominion over what counts as proper magic. House elves are allowed to clean, cook, and occasionally rescue, but never to teach, never to lead. Their magic remains wild, unmeasured, and thereby threatening. It's telling that the only wizard who ever champions house elf rights is Hermione Granger. In the Goblet of Fire, she founds SPEW, the Society for the Promotion of Elfish Welfare. But even she doesn't truly understand their magic. Her concern is moral, not magical. She wants better wages, improved treatment, fair conditions, yet when it comes to the powerhouse elves wield, she, like everyone else, remains in the dark. There is also a deliberate erasure of their capabilities. The Ministry does not record their magical abilities in legal documents. No laws govern how or when an elf may teleport or cast spells. This omission seems less like an oversight and more like a suppression. If the law does not recognize their magic, then their power can be ignored. They remain legally invisible. But invisibility does not mean weakness. On the contrary, it allows their magic to operate under the radar. In Half-Blood Prince, Kreacher and Dobby are sent to spy on Draco Malfoy. They succeed. They move through the castle unseen, unheard, and uncover more than any human could. Their loyalty, when freely given, is unbreakable. Their knowledge is vast. Their access is unrestricted. Still, the question remains, why do they serve? If they are capable of such magic, why subject themselves to cruel masters? Why accept abuse as normal? Kreacher, in particular, offers insight into this. He serves the Black family despite generations of mistreatment. His loyalty is not to kindness but to tradition. Kreacher lives to serve the noble house of Black, he mutters, even when no one is listening. It's not affection, it's programming. Magic, after all, can be used to bend minds. House elves are bound by enchanted contracts, ancient oaths etched into their very being. When Harry orders Kreacher to do something, the elf is compelled, not by respect, but by magic. These are not free beings. Their powers are filtered through a magical subjugation so old that no one questions it anymore. Number 18, Sectum Sempra. There is a moment in the 6th book of the Harry Potter saga that arrives like a slash through calm water. A boy, Harry Potter, is cornered in a bathroom, wand in hand, heart hammering, blinded by fear and rage. And then, as if guided by something dark and instinctive, he utters a word foreign to him in both sound and consequence: Sectum Sempra. In an instant, Draco Malfoy crumples, his body torn open as though struck by invisible blades, blood spilling onto the floor in rivulets. It's not a spell of disarming or immobilization. It is an attack crafted to maim, to destroy. And it came not from Voldemort's mouth or the Dark Lord's grim grimoire, but from a book belonging to a student, or rather, a shadow of a student, long gone, the Half-Blood Prince. Sectum Sempra is one of the most vicious spells introduced in the series, and what makes it so chilling is not only its effect, but its origin. This isn't an ancient curse dug from the depths of forbidden magic. It was homegrown, created by a boy who would become a man standing at the very crux of moral ambiguity, Severus Snape. That the spell originated from Snape's own mind, crafted, tested, and scrawled in the margins of a battered textbook, is perhaps the most terrifying part of all. For enemies, he had annotated with brutal clarity. The mechanics of Sectum Sempra defy the traditional laws of spellcasting within the wizarding world, where curses often rely on tangible reactions, heat, impact, shock. Sectum Sempra mimics the effect of a blade, but not a visible blade. Instead, the target is torn by slashes that seem to come from nowhere, deep and vicious like claws raking across flesh or swords driven by air alone. When Harry uses the spell against Draco, it is not a mere warning or superficial wound. As the book recounts, blood spurted from Malfoy's face and chest, as though he had been slashed with an invisible sword. The image is grotesque, and what's worse, even the caster, Harry, is horrified by what he has done. It is a moment of panic, not triumph. And yet, despite its graphic violence, Sectum Sempra is not listed among the unforgivable curses. This is perhaps the most curious detail of all. The unforgivable curses, Cruciatus, Imperius, and Avada Kedavra, are regulated with iron judgment. Use them once and face Azkaban. Yet Sectum Sempra, capable of shredding flesh and nearly killing a student, is curiously absent from the list. Why? The answer may lie not in its effect, but in its intent. The Ministry defines the unforgivable curses not just by what they do, but by the malevolence built into them. Avada Kedavra is pure death. Cruciatus is pure torture. Sectum Sempra is ambiguous, terrible, yes, but not necessarily designed with murder as the sole outcome. It lacks the permanence of a death curse or the mental corruption of Imperius. However, the legal ambiguity doesn't explain why the spell remains virtually unknown, even to the most learned professors of Hogwarts. Hermione, ever the scholar, cannot locate it in any of her tomes. Flitwick and McGonagall do not recognize it when Harry is questioned. This suggests that Sectum Sempra is not just rare, it is deliberately hidden. But how does a spell with such power stay buried, particularly when its creator is none other than a Hogwarts professor? Snape, who served under Dumbledore and later as headmaster, kept many secrets, but one must wonder why he didn't erase all trace of Sectum Sempra from the Half-Blood Prince's book. Why leave it behind? There is something intensely personal about the spell. It is almost poetic in its violence, swift, elegant, horrifying. It reflects not only Snape's bitterness but his genius. As a young man, Snape was fascinated with power, not brute strength, but the surgical precision of intellect. Sectum Sempra is not a hammer, it is a scalpel, and its selective usage hints at a mind that did not trust the masses with its creation. One does not stumble upon Sectum Sempra in any standard dueling manual for good reason. Like a cursed blade, it is too dangerous in untrained hands. Indeed, when Harry uses the spell, he doesn't understand it. It's a reckless choice made in the heat of battle. The result is devastating. What followed was not victory, but horror and punishment. Snape, upon discovering the scene, intervenes immediately and uses the counter-curse he himself devised, another piece of evidence that this spell was born entirely from his mind. The very idea that someone would invent a curse so deadly and then also create the only known remedy for it shows a level of ownership and control that is rarely seen in magical invention. This was not just a spell, it was an extension of Snape's psyche. What makes this more curious is that the spell is never used again, at least not by the heroes. Harry, though initially fascinated by the prince's dark ingenuity, eventually comes to see the book as toxic. He hides it, buries it, and in doing so he symbolically rejects the kind of casual violence the spell represents. But the Death Eaters, who thrive on chaos and cruelty, why don't they use it? One would expect Bellatrix Lestrange or even Fenrir Greyback to find such a spell delightfully effective, and yet it never surfaces in any of the known battles. Perhaps the reason lies in the spell's instability. Sectum Sempra is unpredictable. Its damage cannot be measured until after it is cast. It is not targeted like the Killing Curse. It is not strategic like a stunning spell. It is, in essence, a magical landmine, dangerous to everyone, especially the user. In a war where precision is everything, a spell that acts like a rampaging beast may be more liability than weapon. And what of the Aurors? Surely those trained to defend against the dark arts would benefit from such a powerful tool. But again, there is no mention of it in official dueling arsenals. If Sectum Sempra was known to the Ministry, it would likely be banned for use in combat, seen as excessive force, perhaps even a war crime in magical jurisprudence. But the more plausible explanation is that the spell was never disseminated. Snape didn't teach it, he didn't publish it, he didn't share it with Voldemort or the Order of the Phoenix. He contained it, except for one lapse, the copy of advanced potion-making he left behind. The most haunting question is, why leave it at all? Snape, ever meticulous, could have destroyed the book, or kept it, or at the very least erased the more dangerous annotations. But he didn't. He allowed the spell and many others to linger in that battered textbook tucked in the back of a cupboard, as if hoping someone, someday, would find them. Perhaps it was pride or defiance, or a final act of rebellion from the boy who once walked the halls of Hogwarts as an outcast, a hidden legacy in ink and blood. When Snape shouts at Harry, "You dare use my own spells against me," he's not just angry, he's wounded. Sectum Sempra was personal. It was forged in darkness, maybe during his loneliest years at Hogwarts. To see it unleashed by a boy he tried to protect, a boy who never understood him, was, in a way, a betrayal. In that moment, we glimpse the fragility beneath Snape's mask of indifference. He isn't furious that Harry hurt Draco. He's furious that Harry desecrated something that once belonged to him alone. There is also the possibility that Sectum Sempra wasn't made for enemies in the traditional sense. Perhaps it was a spell born from trauma, from the need to shield oneself. Snape, growing up in an abusive household, tormented by bullies like James Potter, might have sought a weapon that gave him power when no one else did. In that light, for enemies becomes less a threat and more a declaration of survival. The magic of Sectum Sempra, though violent, might have been his way of carving control out of chaos, and yet that same chaos haunts its every use. The wounds it creates are not clean, they are wild. When Snape uses the counter-curse to heal Draco, it is described as a complex series of movements with his wand and murmured an incantation that sounded almost like a song. This is a beautiful contrast to the brutality of the original curse. It suggests that Snape wasn't just a creator of violence, but also a guardian of its remedy. This duality is the key to understanding him. In the end, Sectum Sempra functions like a mirror. It reflects the hand that wields it. In Harry's case, it revealed his immaturity, his recklessness, and his growing awareness of moral consequences. In Snape's case, it revealed a boy genius who walked a razor's edge between brilliance and cruelty. And in the narrative as a whole, it becomes a symbol of hidden power, of knowledge locked away, waiting to be discovered, abused, or rejected. It is no coincidence that Harry's discovery of the spell mirrors Tom Riddle's discovery of dark magic. Both find hidden power in the forgotten corners of Hogwarts. But where Voldemort embraced the darkness, Harry recoils. He learns. He chooses not to use Sectum Sempra again. That choice, more than anything, is what separates them. There's something almost poetic in the fact that Sectum Sempra never appears in the final battle. As curses fly and heroes fall, no one turns to the blade of the half-blood prince. Perhaps that's because, in the end, the spell belonged to a time and a boy who no longer existed. Snape had changed, and in a way, so had Harry. The spell's silence is its final echo. Still, the name lingers. Sectum Sempra. It is one of the most chilling combinations of syllables in the wizarding lexicon. And unlike the unforgivable curses, it doesn't require the wizard to hate. It only requires that they speak. That's what makes it truly dangerous. Not because it's dark, but because it's seductive, fast, effective, elegant. A child could use it, and one did. It is a reminder that power once discovered cannot be erased, only chosen or rejected. Sectum Sempra wasn't in the official curriculum, but it was learned and remembered and feared, not because of what it did, but because of what it revealed. The darkest spells are not those listed by the ministry. They are the ones written in the margins in desperate ink by boys who dream of vengeance and become men who learn regret. Number 19, Lumos and Nox. Of all the spells in the wizarding world, Few are as commonly used yet as curiously underexplored as lumos and nox. These incantations, so simple in function, light on, light off, are among the first spells young witches and wizards learn, and yet, hidden within their flickering glow, is a deeper enigma that challenges both magical logic and practical sensibility. Harry Potter himself used lumos countless times. The spell is introduced subtly, almost unceremoniously. In The Prisoner of Azkaban, when Harry hides under his bedsheets at Privet Drive, he uses the light of his wand to read. He held up his wand. "Lumos," he whispered, and a light appeared at the end of it, just bright enough to illuminate the page. The passage reveals much more than it seems. The light is dim, just enough to read, not enough to walk through a foggy forest, let alone to illuminate a vast underground cavern. Still, this tiny flicker becomes a symbol of agency for a young wizard navigating a dark world. If lumos is so dim, why then do wizards not use magical lanterns? The wizarding world is technologically stagnant, yes, but not entirely blind to utility. Enchanted objects abound, self-stirring cauldrons, self-writing quills, even magical tents that are larger inside than out. Why not a wand-sized torch or a globe of hovering light? The absence of such tools is notable not because they are difficult to imagine, but because they are conspicuously absent in every context, from Hogwarts corridors to the Forbidden Forest. In The Goblet of Fire, during the third task of the Triwizard Tournament, Harry uses lumos as he moves through a dark and dangerous maze. But again, the light is not expansive. It reveals only the few feet ahead of him. He raised his wand. "Lumos!" The tip flared and cast a small circle of light on the ground. This limited radius reinforces the idea that lumos is not meant for grand illumination. In a setting designed to test champions' survival skills, why would he rely on such a modest spell? The question lingers. What if the true reason wizards cling to lumos is not about brightness, but control? A wand is an extension of the wizard's body, his intent channeled through wood and core. With a spell like lumos, light is not a thing one holds, but a thing one becomes. The wand becomes the lantern, and thus the wizard's body is the beacon. There's no separation between the wielder and the source of light, making it deeply personal, and in its own way, powerfully magical. Then there's the matter of spell classification. Spells like lumos are allowed to function even in restricted zones like Hogwarts, where traceable magic can be blocked or controlled. This exemption suggests that lumos is not deemed harmful by magical regulation. It's a benign charm, at least officially. Yet the implications go further. If it is harmless, why not use it for signaling during a battle? A flash in the dark could warn of Death Eaters, distract a Dementor, or serve as a Morse-like message between allies. In the Deathly Hallows, during their time on the run, Harry, Ron, and Hermione frequently used lumos while camping. The light never drew Death Eaters or triggered detection. This is strange, considering that many magical spells can be traced. Lumos, by contrast, seems to be considered beneath notice. This makes it, paradoxically, the perfect tool for subterfuge, a spell hidden in plain sight. Creatures, too, respond to light. In Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, various beings are shown to be affected by sudden illumination. Though that story is distant from Harry's, it's part of the same universe. If lumos is technically harmless, what happens when it's used in proximity to such creatures? A Grindylow, for example, hates sudden light. A Niffler may be drawn toward it, mistaking it for treasure. So while the spell is simple, its consequences can ripple through ecosystems and magical habitats. There's also a psychological component to this magic. Lumos is comfort. It is the light in the dark, a symbol of hope in terrifying circumstances. Consider the way it's used in The Half-Blood Prince, as Harry and Dumbledore explore the cursed cave. Though lumos is used, it is not the final answer to the deep darkness. Dumbledore conjures a great magical flame instead. This proves lumos has its limits, but it also highlights its role as a first resort, a reflexive act, a whisper of light when the dark is closing in. And then comes the inverse. Nox, rarely discussed, always a footnote. It extinguishes the light summoned by Lumos. That's all it does, or so we're told. But has anyone tried to use Nox on other light sources? Can it be used to extinguish a fire, or the enchanted ceiling of the Great Hall? These are not idle questions. In theory, a wizard attempting Nox on an enchanted lantern might trigger unpredictable consequences, especially if the light is powered by older or darker magic. Imagine, for example, a Death Eater attempting to use Nox to darken a magical lighthouse guiding broomstick flights during a storm. Would it work? Would it fail? The limitations of Nox are never outlined, and perhaps that ambiguity is deliberate. Simplicity hides complexity in the magical world. Wizards trust spells they know. They rarely question the boundaries of function, perhaps out of fear or simple magical tradition. In magical duels, Lumos is almost never used, yet its utility is not negligible. A sudden flash of light can blind an opponent by precious seconds or create the illusion of apparition. But this tactic is rarely employed. Tradition, again, may be to blame. Or perhaps the magical community underestimates what basic spells can do when creatively applied. Hermione Granger, the eternal innovator, might be the exception. Her quick thinking in The Philosopher's Stone, when she used sunlight via a mirror to defeat the devil's snare, suggests she might have seen more potential in Lumos than others. There's also an emotional layer to these spells. Lumos is not just light, it is focus, clarity, and purpose. When Harry first learns to control his wand, Lumos is a milestone. The light flaring to life is a signal of magical control. It's his will made visible. And Nox, then, is the surrender of that power. A return to darkness. In that balance, light summoned, light released, is a metaphor for the whole of magical life. The very etymology of the spells, Latin for light and night, suggests ancient origins. One can imagine early wizards crafting these incantations in the shadow of Roman rule, creating spells as universal as breath. Such simplicity hides millennia of use, of evolution. In a sense, Lumos and Nox are less like tools and more like instincts. Primal responses etched into magical DNA. Wands themselves respond to light magic in unique ways. Ollivander often spoke of the subtle compatibility between wand and spell. A wand favouring fire spells may cast Lumos with more warmth or flickering intensity. A wand made of yew may produce a harsher beam. These nuances suggest that even the simplest spell changes in the hands of different users. Not all light is the same. In the Order of the Phoenix, when Harry and his friends enter the Department of Mysteries, they use Lumos to light their way. The air is thick, the darkness oppressive. But even in that eerie place where thought, time, and death are studied, the spell works. This tells us something. Lumos pierces not just darkness, but perhaps even fear itself. It's a charm rooted in certainty, in belief. Of all the spells that survive into the realm of adult wizardry, Lumos remains omnipresent. Aurors use it, healers use it, even curse breakers in Gringotts rely on it. It has a universality that transcends specialization. The spell is the magical equivalent of a matchstick, always ready, always familiar. It binds generations, first years and war veterans alike. And still, no one has answered why it remains so basic, or why alternatives are so rare. It is possible that magical culture, like Muggle culture, favors nostalgia. Lumos is a comfort. To carry a wand glowing with light is to carry something old and eternal. Lanterns and torches may come and go, but a glowing wand, that's a birthright. The most poetic use of Lumos appears in the films perhaps rather than the books. At the end of The Half-Blood Prince, students raise their wands, casting Lumos in silent tribute to Dumbledore. The light becomes collective, a vigil. This moment, though cinematic, speaks to the soul of the spell. It's not just a tool, it's an expression, a way of saying, we are still here. Finally, consider this. Perhaps Lumos and Nox are not meant to evolve. Not every spell needs improvement. In a world of shifting allegiances and hidden truths, they remain constants, light and dark, on and off. The wizard chooses. In the end, that choice may be the greatest magic of all. Number 20. Obscurials and magic suppression. In the shadowed corners of the wizarding world lies a mystery that seems too large to ignore, yet it is one that the original Harry Potter series never once directly addresses: the Obscurus. Introduced in the Fantastic Beasts films, this dark, parasitic force emerges when a young witch or wizard is forced to suppress their magical abilities. It festers, grows, and eventually manifests as uncontrollable destruction. Credence Barebone is the most prominent example, a tortured soul raised by a fanatical anti-witchcraft woman, stripped of his identity, taught to hate his very nature. The magic within him, denied and feared, turned upon its host and the world around it. And yet the concept feels as though it belongs to a different world than the Hogwarts we know. Credence's tragedy is painted in black and bruises, a narrative of abuse and emotional starvation. But his story invites a deeply uncomfortable question. Why does no one mention Obscurials in the 7 Harry Potter novels? Could it be that no one at Hogwarts, no one at the Ministry, no one in the Order of the Phoenix, not even Dumbledore himself, ever considered the possibility of such a threat in their own backyards? The very idea seems absurd, especially when viewed against the upbringing of one boy who lived under a cupboard and survived Harry Potter. Harry's early life bears all the hallmarks of magical repression. He lived in a cupboard under the stairs, Rowling tells us in Philosopher's Stone, and he had never known love. He was beaten down, neglected, mocked, and punished for accidental bursts of magic. Aunt Petunia would scream when a pot of hair regrew overnight, or when Dudley was chased by a flying snake. Vernon locked him in his cupboard for days, and still no Obscurus, no fatal rupture of magical suppression, just a scar, a temper, and a fierce loyalty to those he loved. The comparison between Harry and Credence is unavoidable. Both were raised by guardians who feared or hated magic. Both were denied knowledge of their heritage. Both were isolated from the magical world. And yet, their stories diverge completely. Where Credence becomes a vessel of destruction, Harry becomes a vessel of hope. The contrast seems less like thematic exploration and more like narrative dissonance. It is here that the contradictions within Rowling's expanding universe become difficult to ignore. The Obscurus, as presented in Fantastic Beasts, is not a subtle phenomenon. It is a ticking bomb, a magical cancer that erupts in physical violence. Newt Scamander describes it in Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them as something most Obscurials do not survive past the age of 10. So how did Harry, at 11, still in the clutches of the Dursleys, not only survive but remain untainted? There are 2 possible explanations. The first is rooted in lore. Perhaps an Obscurus only forms when the child actively loathes their own magic. Harry, though mistreated, never internalized the hatred of his magical nature. His magic was wild, unpredictable, but he never seemed ashamed of it. He longed for escape, not erasure. In Chamber of Secrets, he even tells Ron, "I'm not trying to be funny, but I've been inside this house for nearly 4 weeks, and I've seen no magic whatsoever." His frustration implies desire, not denial. The second explanation is more cynical. Perhaps Rowling had not yet conceived of Obscurials when she wrote the original books. Fantastic Beasts, after all, was penned years after the core series concluded. The introduction of the Obscurus serves a specific narrative function. It provides a tragic foundation for Credence, a mysterious power that justifies his role in the story, and a convenient link to Dumbledore's dark past. But this raises questions of canon integrity. Should a new concept that reshapes our understanding of magic retroactively apply to a world that never hinted at its existence? If the Obscurus is as dangerous and well known as Newt suggests, why is it absent from wizarding education? Why don't professors warn Muggle-born students or those from abusive homes? Why isn't it mentioned in any of the Defense Against the Dark Arts classes, where the curriculum seems to include everything from boggarts to unforgivable curses? Surely a parasitic force that kills children would merit a paragraph in the standard book of spells. There is also the matter of magical support systems. In Order of the Phoenix, we learn that the Ministry tracks underage magical activity with the trace. They know when a child uses magic outside of school, though not who specifically cast the spell. But if they can monitor magic, surely they can monitor its absence too. A child showing no signs of magical expression, especially from a known wizarding family, would be a red flag. Yet no such protocol exists, at least in the main series. Furthermore, the concept of magical suppression runs directly counter to the depiction of Hogwarts as a sanctuary. The school motto, Draco Dormiens Nunquam Titilandus, or Never Tickle a Sleeping Dragon, suggests a light-hearted but powerful environment, one that encourages the development of magical talent. Students are sorted into houses that reflect their character, not their trauma. And though the castle is full of danger, from moving staircases to trolls in the dungeon, it is never presented as a place where a child might implode from unacknowledged pain. Dumbledore's role in all this is especially perplexing. In Fantastic Beasts: The Crimes of Grindelwald, we learn that Albus once had a sister, Ariana, who may have been an Obscurial herself. Attacked by Muggle boys, she was left emotionally shattered, suppressing her magic with disastrous results. She wouldn't use magic, but she couldn't get rid of it, Dumbledore says in Deathly Hallows. It turned inward and drove her mad. This description aligns disturbingly well with the Obscurus phenomenon. Did Dumbledore suspect the truth? If so, how could he fail to warn others, especially Harry? This raises moral questions about Dumbledore's character, already painted in shades of grey by his manipulations in the main series. If he knew about the Obscurus, and Ariana suggests he did, then his silence borders on negligence. Why not study the condition? Why not intervene when magical children show signs of emotional distress? The Dursleys were no secret. McGonagall watched them all day in Philosopher's Stone and called them the worst sort of muggles. And yet Harry was left there without explanation for a decade. If we accept Obscurials as canon, then the wizarding world's inaction becomes a chilling oversight. Religious magical hate groups like the Second Salemers existed even in America, and perhaps in Britain too. The idea that children are being born with magic into environments of hatred is not fantastical. It is inevitable. And if the only known response is silence, then the system is broken. The Ministry, for all its corruption, at least pretends to care about children. In Order of the Phoenix, Harry is put on trial for underage magic, accused of endangering muggles. The same government that monitors underage spells would surely monitor signs of magical trauma. And yet the existence of Obscurials suggests a blind spot, or worse, a willful denial. This contradiction deepens when we consider Tom Riddle. He was raised in a Muggle orphanage, unaware of his magical heritage until Dumbledore arrived. He too experienced neglect, isolation, and emotional repression. He bullied others, could talk to snakes and moved objects with his mind, but no Obscurus. Instead, he became Lord Voldemort, a villain, not a victim. Why is Credence broken and Riddle merely evil? It may be that the Obscurus only takes hold when a child represses magic out of fear or shame, not from lack of knowledge. Riddle embraced his power instinctively. Harry did the same. Credence, Ariana, and others like them were different, punished for magic before they could understand it. Still, this nuance is never articulated in the books. It is retrofitted, a concept glued to the universe rather than grown from it. Even the textbooks feel empty in hindsight. Hogwarts. A history so often quoted by Hermione never mentions Obscurials. Neither does The Dark Forces, a guide to self-protection, Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, or any of the numerous tomes in the restricted section. For a magical condition so dangerous, so visually horrifying, it is astonishing how little institutional awareness exists in Rowling's original canon. The Fantastic Beasts series seems to rely on the shock value of the Obscurus. It is a cinematic force, a creature of smoke and destruction, perfect for visual storytelling. But in literary terms, it lacks roots. It feels less like a natural evolution of the magical system and more like an invasive species, a necessary device to move the plot forward, not a concept that enriches the magical world's internal logic. And perhaps that is the heart of the dissonance. The Harry Potter series was about a boy growing into his power, navigating love, friendship, and identity. The Fantastic Beasts films, by contrast, are about control, secrets, and suppressed histories. The magic in one series liberates, in the other, it devours. The Obscurus belongs to this darker, more adult vision, but it does not belong to the world where a boy once made a birthday cake float. If we attempt to bridge these universes, then the gaps must be addressed. Was Harry immune to becoming an obscurial because of his innate resilience? Was Dumbledore silent because he feared the truth? Were magical authorities ignorant or simply indifferent? These are not just narrative holes, they are thematic ones. Because if magic, at its core, cannot be suppressed without consequence, then the very foundation of Hogwarts, a place of safety and education, is built on denial. And so we are left with questions, not of plot but of principle. What happens when a magical world forgets to protect its most vulnerable? What happens when storytelling grows beyond its original walls? The answer, it seems, is an obscurus, a dark, explosive reminder that magic, like truth, will not stay buried forever. Number 21, Protego. In the world of witchcraft and wizardry, few spells hold as much mystique and practical weight as Protego. Latin for I protect, this charm has become synonymous with magical defense, a guardian shield conjured in a moment of danger. Its elegant simplicity belies the vast complexity of its execution and the layered philosophy behind its use. For students at Hogwarts, Protego is among the first defensive spells taught. But what begins as a simple flick of the wand soon becomes a mirror reflecting the soul of the one who casts it. We have seen it in action numerous times throughout Harry Potter's journey. During the Battle of the Department of Mysteries, Harry used Protego instinctively to repel spells cast by Death Eaters. In Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, he casts it against Professor Snape's attempts to enter his mind during occlumency lessons. The spell did not simply stop Snape's mental assault, it backfired the legilimency spell, showing that Protego is not merely a wall, but a tool capable of pushing danger away. But the effectiveness of this spell varies dramatically from one witch or wizard to another. Why does it sometimes act as an impenetrable force field and other times crumble like dust? Consider the case of Remus Lupin, a highly skilled and experienced wizard, using Protego during skirmishes with Death Eaters. In many instances his shield held fast, but even he, a masterful duelist, could not always rely on it when caught off guard. The truth seems to be that Protego is not a single, universal charm with consistent results. It is a living, breathing extension of the caster's will, talent, emotional state, and magical depth. There is no official categorization in Hogwarts textbooks of levels to the Protego charm, but evidence suggests that multiple variants exist. Take Protego Maxima, as chanted by Professor Flitwick and other staff members during the Battle of Hogwarts. A massive, dome-like shield encased the castle. This wasn't the standard shield charm, it was an evolved form, a fortified version requiring multiple casters and immense power. Flitwick, a dueling champion, added Fianto Duri and Repello Inimicum to the enchantment. Protego, in this context, was not just a spell, it was the foundation of a vast magical barrier. This raises questions about technique. Protego is frequently shown as a reflexive charm, cast quickly, instinctively, but some characters appear to channel it with more control and intensity. Severus Snape's use of the spell is clinical and exacting. During his brief duel with McGonagall in Deathly Hallows, he deflects her fiery projectiles with smooth, precise shields, each crafted in a blink of an eye. The shield does not shimmer or crack, it absorbs and redirects. Meanwhile, when Harry casts it in emotional distress, the results vary. Sometimes he successfully blocks curses, other times the spell falters or is too slow. Emotion, it seems, plays a critical role in the strength of the shield. In Half-Blood Prince, Harry duels Draco Malfoy in the bathroom. His anger and confusion result in violent spells, and when Draco retaliates with Crucio, Harry fails to cast Protego in time. This failure shows that even a skilled wizard, if clouded by emotion or hesitation, can be caught defenseless. But paradoxically, strong emotions can also amplify magic. Lily Potter's sacrifice, though not Protego in the literal sense, functioned as the ultimate shield. It was protection born of love, and Voldemort's killing curse bounced back, leaving Harry untouched. The emotional intent behind Protego may be what separates the spell's basic form from its more potent variations. There's a theory among dueling experts that to truly master Protego, one must cast it with not just technical precision, but moral clarity. To shield not only oneself, but to protect others. It becomes an act of purpose rather than fear. During the final battle, when Harry steps forward to face Voldemort in the Great Hall, he does not cast Protego, but he shields others with his very presence, standing between Voldemort and the defenseless. The question that haunts many scholars is whether Protego can block the unforgivable curses, especially Avada Kedavra. Canonically, it is said that nothing can block the killing curse, but this absolute statement falters under scrutiny. In the Fantastic Beasts films, a powerful form of Protego is shown absorbing and redirecting green flashes, presumably Avada Kedavra, suggesting that under extreme magical conditions the impossible becomes possible. In the video game Hogwarts Legacy, players can deflect the curse if their timing is perfect and their shield is charged. Of course, such portrayals bend lore, but they point toward a deeper curiosity. Why doesn't the Ministry of Magic teach everyone how to shield themselves from it? If a defense against the killing curse were possible, even in rare cases, why isn't it a standard part of magical education? The answer may lie in the nature of the curse itself. Avada Kedavra is not just a spell, it is death itself, given form. It requires immense power and intent to kill. To block it, then, may require not just a shield of magic, but a shield of soul. Dumbledore survived one direct attack from Voldemort in the Ministry Atrium thanks to his own enchantments and perhaps his control over death itself. But even he admitted there are some things you cannot block. The implication is chilling. Only those who walk closely with death can defy it. Moreover, there's an element of secrecy in magical education. The Ministry has historically controlled information. After all, they once refused to name Voldemort aloud, fearing that knowledge itself was power. Teaching a defensive technique that could render the killing curse useless might be viewed as too dangerous. Imagine that every witch and wizard could walk the streets immune to death, a society without fear of consequence. Lawlessness could rise. Perhaps the limitations around Protego are intentional, not due to lack of knowledge, but deliberate suppression. In practical combat, Protego is often a split-second decision. Auras are trained to use it in combination with movement and diversion. Kingsley Shacklebolt, during the attack on the Ministry, didn't just cast Protego, he blended it with hexes and evasive maneuvers. In contrast, amateur witches like Lavender Brown or Colin Creevey rarely used it effectively. It's not a spell for beginners in battle. It requires awareness, quick thinking, and composure. Still, even experienced wizards can be overwhelmed. Take Bellatrix Lestrange, who duels Molly Weasley in the final battle. Her use of shields is masterful, up until her emotional overconfidence makes her vulnerable. Molly's maternal fury cuts through the darkness like a blade, and Bellatrix, perhaps thinking herself invincible, fails to block the killing curse hurled her way. "Not my daughter, you bitch." Molly's words struck with the force of 10 spells. Protego cannot guard against arrogance. This demonstrates a truth. The shield is only as strong as the one who holds it. It's not enough to say the word. You must mean it. You must believe that you are the wall between harm and the world. For Harry, this belief grew over time. In the early years, he cast Protego with the fear of a child. But by Deathly Hallows, he used it like a warrior, protecting others, shielding their escape, even when he himself was wounded. What we see in magical duels is that Protego takes many forms. Sometimes it's a glowing wall, sometimes it's invisible. When cast by Hermione, it often shimmered with light blue ripples. Her meticulous nature made the charm precise. When used by darker wizards, the spell sometimes seemed almost black, as if their intent twisted the magic. This suggests that Protego might not be one spell, but a category, open to personalization. In fact, there's speculation that the spell's effects can be infused with additional intent. Auras sometimes cast Protego totalum to cover entire areas. Others combine it with charms like Muffliato to shield sound. What's being created is not a static defense, but a magical strategy, one layered barrier atop another like armor plates. The wand becomes the architect of a fortress, not merely a blade. One often overlooked example is Luna Lovegood. During the escape from the Lovegood house, Luna, calm and serene, cast defensive spells that held back the attacking Death Eaters. Her magic wasn't born of anger or panic, but clarity. Protego, when cast without fear, seems to hold more firmly. This aligns with what Dumbledore always taught. Fear is the enemy of effective magic. Ultimately, Protego is not about stopping spells, it's about understanding yourself. A witch or wizard who doubts their worth cannot protect others. Those who are proud, vain, or cruel may find their shield brittle. But the one who casts from love, from purpose, from selflessness, that is the one who raises a shield no curse can break. So perhaps the Ministry cannot teach that version of Protego because it cannot be taught. It must be earned. It must be lived. You cannot simply recite the incantation. You must believe deeply that the people behind you are worth saving. Only then does the magic answer your call, and even then it may not block Avada Kedavra, but it will give others the chance to live, as Lilian gave to Harry. In this way, Protego becomes more than a spell. It is a reflection of your soul. It is not the shield that matters, but the hand that raises it. Number 22, memory alteration, falsification. Of all the secrets buried within the magical world, few are as insidious and as poorly understood as the manipulation of memory. In a society where truth is often tangled with enchantment, where spells can alter reality as surely as they can break bones, the trust placed in a wizard's mind should be sacrosanct. Yet what if that very mind is a stage for deception? We know the charm Obliviate erases memories cleanly, a clean slice of amnesia. But there is something far more troubling, something darker, falsification. Horace Slughorn, that portly, affable potions master, offers the most chilling example. In Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, we witness Dumbledore extracting a grotesquely distorted memory from Slughorn's mind. The content is mangled, unnatural. A young Tom Riddle, curious and manipulative, had questioned Slughorn about Horcruxes, but in the altered recollection, Riddle's voice is choppy, his words benign. It is a forgery, not by another's hand, but by Slughorn's own. "I don't know anything about Horcruxes, and I wouldn't tell you if I did," he crows in the doctored version. Yet later, under persuasion, we see the true memory. Tom asking, "How does one split his soul?" say 7 times. Chilling, precise, real. This revelation sets off a cascade of questions. If Slughorn, a well-meaning man, though vain, could so convincingly rewrite his past, how many others might have done the same? And more disturbingly, how often has false memory been submitted as evidence, or worse, accepted as truth? The pensieve is revered in magical lore. Its silver tendrils of thought are treated with near-divine trust. In court, memory drawn into a pensieve is accepted as factual, immutable. Yet how can this be? A memory, it seems, is only as trustworthy as its bearer. As Hermione Granger once said, just because you've got the emotional range of a teaspoon doesn't mean we all have, but even she might admit that memories are no more objective than the feelings that shape them. Dumbledore knew the truth about memory. He treated it with caution, even reverence. That's why he gathered so many from those close to Tom Riddle, Hokey the house elf, Morfin Gaunt, Caractacus Burke, and of course, Slughorn. He needed corroboration. He needed overlapping perspectives, because one version, no matter how vivid, could be a lie. That is the great irony. Magic can illuminate the mind's recesses, but it can also dress them in illusion. Consider the case of Bertha Jorkins. She worked at the Department of Magical Games and Sports. Flighty, not terribly sharp, but she knew things. Voldemort discovered this when he captured her in Albania, but her memories had been tampered with. Someone had altered them to hide secrets, to prevent information from falling into the wrong hands. Voldemort broke through the enchantments, painfully, and in doing so he uncovered details about Barty Crouch Jr., hidden for years. Thus, Bertha's falsified memory directly contributed to the resurrection of the Dark Lord. A single doctored recollection led to an avalanche. This leads to a terrifying thought. If even memories can be crafted and manipulated like stage scenery, then how much of magical history is built on illusions? What if the most sacred events, the foundational truths of the wizarding world, have been selectively edited by those in power? The Ministry of Magic has long relied on thoughts and testimonies captured in pensives, veritaserum, or eyewitness accounts, but all are fallible. Veritaserum can be resisted, occlumency can shield the mind, and a memory in a pensive is no longer a glimpse of raw experience. It is a cinematic retelling, shaped by the mind that birthed it. Take the trial of Morfin Gaunt, uncle to Voldemort. He was accused of hexing Tom Riddle Sr. and his family. A memory from Morfin's own mind sealed his fate. But that memory was a fabrication implanted by Tom Riddle himself. With a wave of his wand and a flicker of cruelty, Voldemort altered Morfin's memory, made him believe he had committed murder. Morfin rotted in Azkaban for a crime he never committed. The court believed the memory because it came from within, because it was truth. But truth, in the magical world, is a slippery fish. Even in the First Wizarding War, rumors persisted of auras using memory spells not only to erase, but to distort. Alleged confessions extracted by force. Traitors unmasked based on twisted recollections. How many were guilty? How many merely believed they were? Barty Crouch Jr. again serves as a grim example. The memory of his trial, recovered from Dumbledore's pensive, is seared into the minds of readers. The desperation in his eyes, the pleading to his mother. But that memory wasn't Barty's. It was Dumbledore's observation. How much was filtered through his perception? Could someone else have interpreted it differently? What if Crouch's guilt was not as absolute as it seemed? The line between witness and judge becomes perilously thin. The practice of magical memory manipulation likely began with good intentions, to heal trauma, to protect loved ones from unbearable truths, to enforce secrecy, as with the Statute of Secrecy itself. Muggles routinely have their memories altered after witnessing magical phenomena, but the cumulative effect of such alterations is unknowable. Gilderoy Lockhart built his entire career on stealing stories and erasing the original teller's memories. His entire identity, his fame, his books, his legend, was a castle built atop a graveyard of stolen truths. How many voices were silenced forever? This magic is not just dangerous, it is existentially horrifying. If one's memory can be reshaped, what remains of the self? Identity, after all, is a chain of recollection. A person is what they remember of themselves. Alter that, and you alter the soul. Perhaps that is why Horcrux creation requires murder, not just for the act of killing, but for the desecration of what makes a human whole. Voldemort understood this. He understood how memory, like soul, can be fractured. It is striking, then, how casually the magical world accepts such instability. Arthur Weasley tinkers with Muggle memory charms. Obliviators laugh about wiping the minds of entire neighborhoods, but what if one obliviator becomes corrupt? What if one aura reprograms an innocent? Who would know? Who could prove otherwise? The pensive, for all its elegance, offers no guarantees. It is not a vault of purity, it is a screen projecting the thoughts of a potentially compromised narrator. Memories are influenced by bias, emotion, suggestion, and, as we now know, direct alteration. And the worst part, a falsified memory can feel as real to its owner as the truth. Slughorn genuinely feared his own recollection. He was disgusted by what he believed he had said, but he couldn't remember it properly because he had rewritten the page. In a world obsessed with lineage and legacy, what if entire family histories have been rewritten? What if noble houses have erased scandal? What if great heroes of the past were not so heroic and simply ensured no one remembered otherwise? The Black family burned names off their tapestry, but what if they burned the memories too? The wizarding world teaches its young about spells, potions, and defense, but not about memory ethics. Hogwarts does not offer a course in magical cognition. No class warns students of the fragility of their own minds. And perhaps that is intentional. A population that does not question its memories is easier to control. It is not unthinkable that the Ministry itself has engaged in widespread falsification. In the wake of Voldemort's return, officials scrambled to rewrite their roles. Many denied their earlier denial. Cornelius Fudge refused to believe the truth until it stared him in the face. Then, almost overnight, he was gone, replaced, forgotten. Was that merely political? Or was memory manipulation used to sanitize the narrative? Rita Skeeter, infamous gossip columnist, once said that truth is a matter of perspective. She too operated with altered truths, though in ink rather than thought. But the principle is the same. In a society built on stories, who controls the storytellers controls reality. In the Muggle world, lies are exposed through evidence, but in the magical world, even evidence can lie. And that may be the most terrifying spell of all. When Harry Potter stood before the Wizengamot in Order of the Phoenix, they questioned his sanity, his motives, even his honesty. But never once did anyone ask whether the minds of his accusers had been tampered with. No one checked Cornelius Fudge's memory. No one questioned whether Dolores Umbridge's fanatical certainty had magical roots. The assumption was clear. The mind is sacred, but it is not. It is a playground for sorcery. There is no known counter-charm to detect falsified memory. No magical fingerprint reveals the truth beneath layers of enchantment. It is left to brave souls like Dumbledore to piece together the mosaic from fragments, to chase ghosts through the haze. And so perhaps the gravest threat to the wizarding world is not Voldemort, not blood purity, not even death. It is forgetfulness, engineered forgetfulness, the quiet hum of altered minds. The dark mark may have faded, but the scars left by twisted memory remain, and they may shape the future in ways no prophecy can foresee. Number 23. Rita Skeeter's Quick Quotes Quill. The quill was thin, acid green, and eerily alive. It glided across the parchment with a life of its own, etching scandal and insinuation with every flourish. This was no ordinary writing instrument. It was Rita Skeeter's weapon of choice, the enchanted Quick Quotes Quill. But beneath the sparkle of sensational headlines and syrupy prose lay a disturbing question. How could the wizarding world allow such an artifact to exist, unchallenged and unregulated? Rita Skeeter did not merely report events, she distorted them. In Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, her coverage of the Triwizard Tournament was less about facts and more about fiction, wrapped in a gloss of credibility. Tears fill those startlingly green eyes as our conversation turns to the parents he can barely remember. Her quill wrote about Harry, even though he had shown no such emotion. Harry hadn't cried, he hadn't even blinked, but the quill, under its mysterious enchantment, had rewritten his truth. It bent reality, not just recording, but altering. And no one stopped it. The magical charm imbued into the quill appears far more advanced than standard enchantments. It doesn't simply transcribe. It interprets, exaggerates, and invents. Magic in the wizarding world usually obeys clear boundaries. Spells have definitions, incantations have limits. But this quill, with its capacity to fabricate details and distort statements, behaves almost like a semi-sentient being. Its magic is not passive. It reacts. It chooses tone. It decides what matters. In that sense, it is not just enchanted, it is editorialized. The question must be asked, what kind of magic lies at the core of this quill? Standard enchantments, even those cast by new T-level witches and wizards, don't normally allow for abstract interpretation. Was it laced with legitimacy, subtly reading the intentions of its subjects? Or perhaps infused with a form of minor divination, scrying into the emotional essence of a person and turning it into exaggerated narrative? Either way, this is no simple object. It is a mirror warped by its creator's ambition and vanity. And then there's the ethical conundrum. Rita's enchanted quill essentially rewrites reality on paper, and once published, her version becomes the accepted truth for many readers. In a world where the press plays a key role in shaping public perception, this kind of artifact is dangerous. It doesn't just reflect bias, it manufactures it. What's worse, it does so with plausible deniability. Rita could always shrug and say, "It's just my quill," as if the tool alone was responsible and not the hand guiding it. Yet the Ministry of Magic remained silent. There was no legislation against such a device, no legal precedent banning the use of enchanted media tools. This silence reveals something troubling about wizarding society, the blurry line between manipulation and magic. If an object like this can operate freely within journalism, what prevents similar tools from infiltrating courtrooms, political speeches, or educational settings? Could one not imagine a version of the quill used during a Wizengamot trial? Picture a defendant speaking plainly only for the enchanted quill to rewrite his testimony. "I admit to betrayal, I revelled in it." And once the statement is on paper, it's submitted into evidence. Would truth even matter in such a context? How easily justice could become theatre, orchestrated by the quill's quiet scratches on parchment. In fact, the case of Sturgis Podmore offers a chilling parallel. Convicted of attempting to break into the Department of Mysteries, Podmore claimed innocence. But the press made no effort to explore his version. Had someone used a quill like Rita's in documenting his story, how would the outcome differ? Would public opinion shift? Would legal action waver? In a society built on perception as much as truth, the lines begin to blur alarmingly. One might even ponder a deeper danger. If the quill can twist words, can it also twist intent? Could someone write an unforgivable curse, say Avada Kedavra, with the quill and expect it to activate? It's unlikely, given the known properties of spellcasting which require wand work and intent, but the notion underscores a terrifying possibility. Magic, when embedded in artifacts, can subvert traditional channels. We accept that wands need loyalty, intention, and incantation. But what if a pen didn't? Even Hogwarts wasn't immune. During the Triwizard Tournament, Rita reported on the supposed romance between Hermione Granger and both Harry Potter and Victor Crumb. These articles led to hate mail, threats, and unnecessary strain. "You want to look at page 10, Hermione had said bitterly. "There's a picture of me, kissing Crumb." There was no kiss, there was no triangle, but the damage had already been done by ink, not wand. So why don't others follow Rita's lead? Why don't wizards charm their quills for school essays, their parchment for ministry reports, their books for automatic grading? The answer may lie in the perception of credibility. Rita, for all her popularity, was never fully respected. Her pieces were read, yes, but rarely believed by the intellectual elite. Dumbledore himself refused to speak to her, and Hermione went so far as to discover her animagus secret to expose her corruption. Still, the silence from the authorities is deafening. When Hermione trapped Rita in a jar during the events of the Order of the Phoenix, she effectively neutralized a major media threat and broke no laws in doing so. This act implies that there was no formal framework to address such violations of magical journalism. The system lacked tools to combat this form of soft manipulation. There were rules against the imperious curse, but none against warping words. There's a parallel here to Muggle society, where media bias and digital misinformation wreak havoc with public trust. But at least in the non-magical world, there's a sense of accountability, laws, ethics boards, public scrutiny. In the wizarding world, so much is left to tradition and unwritten rules, and when magic gets involved, especially autonomous or semi-sentient magic, the need for oversight becomes urgent. Could Rita's quill be seen as a form of magical AI? It mimics human decision-making. It creates rather than repeats. It adapts to emotional cues, and it can't be fully controlled by its user. In that sense, the quill becomes more than a tool. It becomes a character, a co-author with a mind of its own. And that, perhaps, is what makes it most dangerous of all. Notably, the Ministry never investigated the origins of the quill. Was it of Rita's own making? Did she enchant it herself, or did she purchase it from a shady artifact dealer? The wizarding black market is rich with cursed objects, bewitched items, and questionable curiosities. In a world where love potions are sold to teenagers, is it really surprising that a reality-bending quill goes unnoticed? Then there's the question of influence. Rita didn't just write for the Daily Prophet. She influenced elections, school policy, and public morale during times of war. Her slanderous articles about Harry during his 5th year contributed to the larger public skepticism about Voldemort's return. A single quill in the right hands shaped the narrative of the magical world's most critical turning point. Even more disconcerting is the implication that others might possess similar artifacts. What if the Malfoys had their own quills to sway public opinion? What if Dolores Umbridge, with her affinity for surveillance and control, had access to such tools in the Ministry? What if textbooks like The Dark Forces, A Guide to Self-Protection, were quietly edited by enchanted quills to reflect government propaganda? These are not just hypotheticals. The magical world, as J.K. Rowling presents it, is built on layers of hidden influence. From Horcruxes to Hallows, from secret prophecies to animagus registries, power often lies in the unseen. A quill may seem small, but in a society where documentation equals proof, it is a weapon as sharp as any wand. When Harry read about himself in the Daily Prophet, he often felt isolated and angry, not just because the stories were false, but because they were accepted as truth. And that is the core of the issue. The pen, enchanted or not, creates truth in the eyes of the public. Once printed, a lie takes on a life of its own. It's no longer just fiction, it's memory, it's history. So perhaps the most terrifying aspect of Rita Skeeter's quill isn't its charm or even its cunning, it's its permanence. Words, once etched in magical ink, linger far longer than the truth they obscure. Number 24, the Weasley family clock. There it stood, tall and proud in the corner of the Burrows' cluttered kitchen. A grandfather clock unlike any other in the wizarding world. Crafted from old polished oak, with ornate hands that spun not around numbers, but around labels like home, school, work, lost, hospital, in transit, prison, mortal peril, and, perhaps most chilling of all, dead. The Weasley family clock wasn't meant to mark the hour, it marked fate. J.K. Rowling described it briefly, nestled in the comfort of family life. It had 9 golden hands, and instead of numbers around the face were things like time to make tea, time to feed the chickens, and you're late. But that cheerful portrayal was later peeled back to reveal something far more uncanny. This clock knew where each Weasley was at any moment. Not only their location, it knew their state. That raised a chilling question. What exactly powered it? When Molly Weasley glanced at that clock and saw all her children's hands hovering over mortal peril during the Second Wizarding War, it wasn't metaphor. The clock didn't guess. It knew. Fred, George, Ron, Bill, Charlie, Ginny, Percy. Every hand moved with invisible precision, as if the very essence of each person were tied to the mechanism. What kind of magic could reach that deep? To answer that, one must look beyond household charms and delve into the darkest and most ancient of magical arts, soul-binding. It is not unreasonable to imagine that each hand was linked to its respective person through something far stronger than a location spell. Consider how Horcruxes, as Dumbledore explained, anchored a fragment of soul to an object. Is it so far-fetched to believe that a magical artifact could anchor a trace of a living soul for the sake of observation? Some have proposed that the clock is tied to blood, that it functions as a familial artifact akin to the blood quill or the Black family tapestry. But that theory frays at the edges. After all, Fleur Delacour's name appeared on it after marrying Bill, and Harry's name, during his long stays at the Burrow, likely hovered there as well. The clock doesn't track only blood, it tracks love, loyalty and belonging. But how can it detect danger? The hand marked mortal peril has appeared again and again, during the events of the Department of Mysteries, during the Battle of the Seven Potters, and even when Ron, Harry and Hermione disappeared from the Burrow after Bill and Fleur's wedding. Could it be tied to magical resonance, picking up the surges in protective enchantments around each individual, or is it something more direct, perhaps an echo of life force, not unlike the trace? The Ministry of Magic, with all its surveillance methods, the trace for underage wizards, the taboo spell used to track Voldemort's name, never utilized such a clock. Why not? Surely, if a single family could use this device to monitor loved ones, the Aura Office could monitor threats, or the Department of Magical Transportation could revolutionize tracking, unless the truth is that the Ministry couldn't replicate it. Arthur Weasley, head of the Misuse of Muggle Artifacts Office, was a man fascinated by the fusion of function and magic. He enchanted toasters, rubber ducks and car engines. Could it be that this very obsession led him to create the clock, or at least rebuild it from something ancient? The craftsmanship hints at a much older origin. The wood is dragon heart pine, rare and heat-resistant. The hands are gold, likely goblin-forged, and the labelling, straightforward, almost brutal, smacks of wartime urgency. There's a disturbing theory among magical historians that the Weasley clock wasn't the first of its kind. In the early records of the Black family, notorious for their obsessive documentation, there was mention of a seer's dial kept by Phineas Nigellus Black, said to move with the heartbeat of his children. That device vanished after the fall of his line. But if such a thing existed, the Weasley clock may be a rare surviving heir of a long-forgotten magical tradition. If it truly binds to the soul, what then are the ethical implications? In tracking her children's every move, Molly Weasley displayed a maternal love unmatched in the series, but also, perhaps unknowingly, she exercised a kind of surveillance that would make even Dolores Umbridge raise an eyebrow. Is the clock passive, or does it extract? Is it a comfort, or a cage? Consider this. What if Fred, before the Battle of Hogwarts, had lied about his plans and gone somewhere secret? The clock would have betrayed him. It always tells the truth. And in doing so, it removes all privacy. Could Percy, during his estrangement from the family, feel his hand sliding back toward home and fight the pull? Or did his hand rest coldly on work, a reminder that the clock never judged, only watched? And what of criminals? If a Weasley were to end up in Azkaban, would the clock say prison? Azkaban? Or something more vague like unknown? If so, why? And if not, if it could say prison with certainty, then why in all these years has the Ministry never asked to borrow or examine it? The truth may be more unsettling still. Perhaps the Ministry knows about such magic. Perhaps they fear it, or worse, perhaps they use it quietly without the public's knowledge. A clock that sees danger, death and distance, and cannot lie, would be a powerful weapon in the hands of a regime obsessed with control. This brings us to another eerie element, the hand labelled dead. Who among the Weasleys has seen it used? When Fred died in the Battle of Hogwarts, did his hand slowly drift toward it? Or did it snap into place like a judgment? Did Molly Weasley stand before the clock and watch the inevitable, helpless? Magic like this is not emotionless. Ancient devices, especially ones built on soul-linking magic, often carry emotional weight. The clock may be bound not only to the people it tracks, but to the love of the one who set it. Molly, whose fierce love and overbearing care defined her motherhood, may have unknowingly embedded part of herself in the clock. That's why it works only for the Weasleys, and only in the Burrow. If the magic is bound to her will, her magic, her soul, then the object is irreplicable. not because others lack the knowledge, but because they lack the same depth of care. A similar charm cast with indifference would fail. The Weasley clock may be less an artifact and more an enchantment of love turned physical, an old form of enchantment once known as a maternal tether in Celtic magical tradition. And yet, even love can become control. If every movement is watched, every location logged, what freedom remains? Ron Weasley, whose struggles with identity and independence thread through all 7 books, grew up under the shadow of this clock. Perhaps that's why he often bristled at being overshadowed, because at home, even his location was never his own. What happens when the hands spin without answer? What if one disappears? Did it ever happen? During the Horcrux hunt, the Weasleys didn't know where Ron was. Did his hand rest at mortal peril? Or did it vanish altogether, terrifying Molly into sleepless nights? The implications extend further. If the clock could be adapted to read magical anomalies, say by enhancing it with seer's sight, it might predict death. Not after the fact, but before. It could become not a clock, but an oracle. If so, it must be watched closely. Perhaps that's why Arthur never allowed it out of the kitchen. Not because it's a household item, but because it's dangerous. One day, someone will try to replicate it. They'll fail, not because they lack magical skill, but because they lack the heart that made it work. And that may be the deepest secret of the Weasley clock. It is not a surveillance device, not in the cold sense. It is a mother's prayer cast in brass and wood, a spell not written in books but etched into every meal cooked under its ticking presence. Still, the ethical dilemma remains. If such magic exists, can exist, what is to stop a darker force from twisting it? Imagine a Death Eater version of the clock, not to protect, but to hunt. Imagine a ministry model, mandatory in every home, tracking citizens not out of love but suspicion. That's the true danger of the Weasley clock. It proves what magic can do, not just in theory, but in practice. It is a case study in magical surveillance, wrapped in the skin of domestic comfort. It is proof that love can create artifacts more powerful than any wand, and that such power, if misunderstood, could reshape society. So the next time someone describes the Weasley clock as adorable or quaint, remember, it sees everything, it does not forget, and it never, ever lies. Number 25, Magical Cauldrons. In the dusky, potion-stained dungeon beneath Hogwarts, hundreds of cauldrons have hissed, bubbled, and exploded. They sit like ancient iron sentinels, their bellies blackened from use, as if each one carries the weight of forgotten spells and poisonous secrets. To most students, a cauldron is just a tool, a vessel to stir ingredients and await a reaction. But the truth is far more arcane. The cauldron is not a pot. It is a ritual object, a magical crucible with rules older than Hogwarts itself. Every first year at Hogwarts is required to bring a pewter cauldron, standard size 2. That regulation is enshrined in Hogwarts, a history, a book that even Hermione Granger cited repeatedly, although she once scoffed at its lack of magical nuance. What the book doesn't explain is why pewter, why size 2, and why no one questions the silent tradition. Why not silver? Why not gold? Why does a standard exist in a world where magic bends reality? It is a strange thing, this obsession with material. While Muggle chemistry relies on reactions and heat, magical potion making intertwines with the properties of the container itself. Professor Slughorn once favoured brass cauldrons for certain elixirs, claiming they resonated better with emotional ingredients like unicorn blood or amortentia. Brass, according to him, carried empathic vibrations, but in the hands of a lesser wizard, a brass cauldron could warp the potion entirely. The Ministry's Department of Magical Equipment Control maintains a short but potent list of approved cauldron materials: pewter, copper, brass, silver, and occasionally obsidian. Gold, though magically neutral and heat-resistant, is rarely used. It doesn't conduct magical energy efficiently and often dilutes powerful brews. As bizarre as it seems, cauldrons act as magical amplifiers or conduits between raw ingredients and the wizard's intent. The wrong material doesn't just spoil a potion, it can alter its very nature. In the brewing of polyjuice potion, for example, a copper cauldron ensures proper bonding of ingredients during the month-long steeping. In her second year, Hermione brewed the potion in a battered pewter cauldron she borrowed from the student storage room. The result, as recorded, was disastrous. She transformed partially into a cat, a mishap many chalked up to her accidental use of feline hair. But some potion masters argue the real problem was the cauldron's residual contamination from previous brews. Pewter, they claim, retains traces of old enchantments unless purified correctly. This brings up a troubling inconsistency: the state of cauldrons in the Hogwarts dungeons, bent rims, scorched sides, rusted seams. Students use second-hand equipment with a disregard no Muggle chemistry lab would allow. Why does Hogwarts, the premier school of magic, tolerate such lax standards in potion making, especially when brewing mishaps have hospitalized students, melted furniture, and once turned an entire third-year class of Hufflepuffs bright blue for 3 weeks? There are no sanitation charms enforced, no sterilization protocols visible. The potions dungeon is coated in residue from decades of spilled brews. The air is heavy with dragon bile and the faint smell of stale dittany. Yet professors continue to ignore the issue. Perhaps it is tradition. Perhaps it is intentional. Perhaps the very instability of the equipment is meant to teach students caution and precision, a trial by magical fire. But that theory raises a more profound question. If the cauldron is so susceptible to magical interference, so influential in shaping the potion's properties, then might it not also be a vessel for deeper enchantments? Could the cauldron itself be a spell, or even a spellcaster? In ancient magical texts, cauldrons were revered not as tools but as portals. The cauldron of Dagda from Celtic mythology could summon endless sustenance. The Welsh pear Dodeni was said to resurrect the dead. These legends, dismissed by many as symbolic, may in fact hint at early wizarding attempts to use cauldrons as magical engines, devices not for potion brewing but for spellcasting on a grander scale. Albus Dumbledore once confided to Elphias Doge that certain vessels remember magic, especially when they've seen death. While he never clarified the meaning, the quote has inspired speculation among magical historians. What if a cauldron, long exposed to spells and potions, becomes something more, a focus, a relic, a magical artifact that doesn't just reflect magic, it channels it? There is precedent. In Hogwarts, The Secrets and Shadows, a now banned tome, found in the restricted section, an anonymous author recounts an underground chamber beneath Durmstrang Institute where cauldrons the size of carriages were used not to brew potions, but to cast storms. The chamber, known as the Tempestrum, allegedly used cauldrons filled with elemental cores, phoenix feathers, basilisk bile, powdered moonstone, and the results were cataclysmic. If this is more than myth, it implies cauldrons may operate as reservoirs of magical potential, shaped by ritual, not recipe. This possibility adds a chilling undertone to the story of Voldemort's resurrection. In the Goblet of Fire, a large black cauldron is used to perform the ritual that restores his body. While the focus remains on the incantations and ingredients, bone of the father, flesh of the servant, blood of the enemy, no one questions the role of the cauldron. Why was such a vessel necessary? Could the ritual have succeeded in any pot? Or did the cauldron's dark history amplify the magic? Notably, the resurrection potion required sustained heat, precise timing, and extreme magical volatility. A regular container would have cracked. That cauldron, enormous and ancient, may have been chosen not just for size, but for resonance. Perhaps it had been used in other dark rituals. Perhaps it remembered. Perhaps that is why the rebirth succeeded. The idea of a cauldron storing magical memory aligns with recent research from the Department of Mysteries. A 1995 internal report, leaked by a dismissed unspeakable, describes containment vessels with residual spell fields, specifically noting that pewter was porous to spell echoes. While the ministry suppressed the report, fragments made it into magical academia, sparking debates about the nature of magical residue. This raises further questions. If a cauldron remembers magic, can it also be corrupted by it? Could brewing certain potions repeatedly warp the vessel's nature? Could a cauldron used for curses turn even healing potions malevolent? There are whispers in Nocturne Alley of cursed cauldrons, blackened things that whisper during brewing and twist even Felix Felicis into despair. In 1981, a potions master named Letitia Rinn vanished after experimenting with ritual cauldron magic. Her notes, discovered decades later in a burned-out cottage near Scafell Pike, detail her attempt to create a spell conductor cauldron. According to her writings, she theorized that if spells can be cast through wands, they can also be cooked into permanence. Her plan was to trap a complex warding spell within a cauldron's base by embedding crushed runestones into molten bronze during its forging. The cauldron exploded during testing. All that remained was a scorch mark shaped like a rune. Rinn's obsession with imbuing cauldrons with active spells wasn't madness. It was an echo of older magical practices, rituals in which cauldrons served as altars, not cookware. The Black Forest witches of the 14th century were said to enchant cauldrons to brew prophecies, mixing divination with alchemy. Their cauldrons, sealed in iron, are rumoured to still whisper futures when moonlight strikes them. Even in modern Hogwarts, these deeper truths linger at the edges of the curriculum. Professor Snape once remarked, "A poorly maintained cauldron is like a leaky wand, a danger to everyone, including the user." But what he didn't say, and what no teacher dares admit, is that cauldrons may be more than wands. Wands are personal, cauldrons are collective. Wands channel intent, cauldrons transform it. Why then has no one in the magical world, no ministry, no school, no institution, officially pursued the potential of cauldrons as spell-weaving devices? The answer may lie in fear. Potions can be undone, antidoted, reversed. Spells cooked into being may not be so cooperative. To weaponize a cauldron could be to create a spell bomb, a slow-cooked catastrophe waiting to erupt. Yet perhaps the fear is not that cauldrons might unleash dangerous magic. Perhaps the fear is that they might remember ours. Every curse, every lie, every selfish intent whispered over a simmering potion, soaked into pewter, layered like sediment. Maybe the cauldron is not just a mirror of magical discipline, maybe it is a judgment of it. And so Hogwarts continues to hand out dented pewter cauldrons to children, letting them brew within tools stained with decades of spells. Whether through oversight or design, the tradition continues. But one must wonder, when the pot stirs back, will we notice before it boils over? Number 26, the Mirror of Erised. The Mirror of Erised, an ancient, towering structure of ornate gold and cold glass, stood forgotten in a remote classroom at Hogwarts, covered by a dusty cloth. It was no ordinary object, but an artifact of immense magical potency. Erised stra eru oit ube kafru oit onwosi, read the inscription. Backwards, it spelled out the mirror's secret. I show not your face, but your heart's desire. This alone should have been enough to instill caution. Yet for some reason, this mirror was not secured in the Department of Mysteries, not sealed behind ancient runes, but hidden in a dusty classroom behind a door that a curious 11-year-old could open. Harry Potter discovered the Mirror of Erised on Christmas night during his first year. There, surrounded by the cold silence of the castle, he gazed into its depths and saw not his own reflection, but a family he had never met. His parents, James and Lily, smiled at him from the other side of the glass. His heart clenched. He was looking at the happiest moment of his life, Rowling wrote. Yet none of it was real. The mirror offered no truth, only a vision of what the soul longed for most. The illusion was so powerful that Harry returned night after night just to see them again. Dumbledore warned him, gently but firmly, "The mirror gives us neither knowledge nor truth. Men have wasted away before it." And yet why did it sit in that abandoned room? If it was so dangerous, why wasn't it locked away in a vault? Hogwarts housed hundreds of enchanted objects, some mischievous, others malicious, but none quite as quietly destructive as this one. The mirror didn't attack or curse. It seduced. That made it all the more dangerous. It didn't threaten your life. It offered your heart's longing until you forgot to eat, to sleep, to live. Consider what it did to Harry. A child who had never known love found it in a reflection. He risked being caught out of bed, breaking school rules, even jeopardizing his safety, all to glimpse a lie. The mirror didn't satisfy him. It fed a hunger that grew stronger. He admitted, "I don't want to need the mirror," but he couldn't help himself. Imagine if someone more vulnerable had found it, a grieving widow, a desperate lover, a broken soul. How long before they stopped distinguishing dream from reality? This leads us to a troubling question: who created such an object? There is no mention of the Mirror of Erist in any Hogwarts textbook. It is not listed among known magical relics like the Philosopher's Stone or the Deathly Hallows. It has no attribution, no history. For an artifact so deeply tied to the psyche, so capable of revealing a person's innermost longing, it's a glaring omission. Was it deliberate? Did the Ministry suppress its origins? Or is its maker so lost to time that even Dumbledore did not know who forged it? We must consider the possibility that the mirror was not created for benevolent reasons. A device that reveals the deepest desire of the soul is a weapon if placed in the wrong hands. Imagine a Dark Lord using it to find his enemy's weaknesses, or a Ministry interrogator turning it on prisoners to learn secrets they themselves do not fully understand. Its capacity to expose longing could unravel someone's mental defenses more effectively than Veritaserum. It does not force truth, it exposes the yearning that drives all action. Could it be used in therapy? Theoretically, yes. A skilled legilimens or mind healer might interpret a patient's reflection to diagnose unresolved trauma. If a child sees themselves holding a sibling they never had, that could speak volumes. But therein lies the danger. The mirror is unfiltered. It shows what the heart desires most at that moment. But that might change in an hour. The mind is not static, and interpreting the mirror's message without context is reckless. Healing requires trust, guidance, gradual unraveling, not sudden exposure to the soul's most vulnerable cry. In a pedagogical context, the mirror's implications are equally chilling. Would a teacher dare show a student what they most want just to shame or correct them? A student who sees themselves wielding power over their classmates or receiving praise they never get at home could be traumatized. The mirror invades the psyche without consent. It does not ask permission to reveal desire. It simply shows there is no choice, no filters, no protection. One wonders what Albus Dumbledore truly saw. He claimed, with a twinkle in his eye, that he saw himself holding a pair of woolen socks. But later, Harry suspects this wasn't true, and Rowling later confirmed that Dumbledore saw something far more tragic: his family alive, reconciled, whole. His sister Ariana unharmed, his brother smiling, his guilt washed away. This adds a layer of sorrow to the mirror's tale. Even the wisest of wizards is not immune to its pull. Dumbledore knew better, but still he looked. The mirror speaks to something universal and dangerous: the ache of the unattainable. It bypasses reason and shows the hunger beneath. And that hunger, if nurtured by the mirror's constant affirmation, can become obsession. This is not a tool, it's a test. Can you look upon your deepest yearning and walk away? Few can. Fewer still would willingly choose to destroy such a thing, even knowing its cost. If the mirror was so powerful, why was only one ever made? That too is telling. Perhaps it cannot be replicated, perhaps it should not. Objects that touch the core of humanity, like the Resurrection Stone, the Elder Wand, or the mirror, tend to come with curses, consequences, or corruption. They are unique because duplicating them would be inviting disaster. 1,000 derised mirrors across the wizarding world would mean 1,000 tragedies waiting to unfold. There's another theory to consider. Perhaps the Mirror of Erist is not entirely under human control. It may be sentient, or at least semi-aware. It doesn't simply show what you want, it seems to understand what lies beneath surface wants. Harry didn't see sweets or fame. He saw love. He saw belonging. That subtlety suggests the mirror doesn't just reflect, it interprets. And if it interprets, then it chooses. That's power no object should have. Why then does Hogwarts keep it at all? Perhaps for the same reason the castle hides Room of Requirement, because Hogwarts is alive in some way, and what it contains cannot always be explained through logic. Dumbledore moved the mirror to protect Harry and others, but the fact that it was accessible at all raises questions about oversight, about risk. Was this a rare lapse in Dumbledore's judgment, or did he want Harry to find it? There's merit to that suspicion. Dumbledore was famous for believing in tests. He did not always prevent harm if he thought the lesson was worth the cost. Letting Harry discover the mirror might have been a way to introduce him to the complexities of loss, desire, and self-control. But was that a fair burden for a child who had already lost so much? The Hogwarts library held no mention of the mirror, and not even Hermione Granger, with her voracious reading habits, ever uncovered its history. This absence is conspicuous. It suggests either deliberate erasure or profound secrecy. Either way, it adds to the aura of myth. Magical Britain is built on oral tradition and secret histories. Not every artifact is catalogued, not every danger is written down, and perhaps that's intentional. If the mirror's origins are hidden, who else knew of its power? Did the founders of Hogwarts use it? Was it Salazar Slytherin's creation, a way to manipulate desire in his students? Or was it Rowena Ravenclaw's, a mirror not of vanity but of inner truth? These are only theories, but even as speculation they carry weight. The mirror's complexity and danger imply a masterful creator, and few would have the skill or motive. Even more alarming is how many people could have stumbled upon it. The castle is filled with students, ghosts, and mischievous creatures like Peeves. Any one of them could have fallen under the mirror's spell. Imagine if Draco Malfoy had found it. What might he have seen? His father's approval, himself as head of the ministry? Or if Snape had discovered it as a student, would he have seen Lily Potter smiling at him, forgiving him, choosing him instead of James? That the mirror has not caused more documented tragedies is either a miracle or a sign that Hogwarts ghosts know more than they let on. Perhaps they steer students away from danger, or perhaps, like Dumbledore, they believe the mirror serves a purpose, however dangerous. But this is a perilous belief. Just because something can teach does not mean it should. The mirror of Erist is not evil, but it is not benign either. It is temptation crystallized, the embodiment of that whisper in the dark that says, "What if?" It shows no lies, but it offers no solutions. It is a mirror, yes, but of the soul, not the self. And sometimes that is the most dangerous magic of all. Number 27, Ghosts. In Hogwarts, history is not just remembered, it walks the corridors, whispers in the stairwells, and passes through walls. Ghosts, transparent and eternal, drift through the ancient castle like memories frozen in time. While Muggle schools hang portraits of their founders, Hogwarts is inhabited by its very past. The ghost of nearly headless Nick glides gently down the Gryffindor corridor, nodding politely. The Bloody Baron floats in eerie silence, his silver bloodstains gleaming faintly. The Grey Lady, silent and sorrowful, vanishes when footsteps approach. And Peeves, though not technically a ghost, remains a mischievous echo of chaos no one can quite explain or remove. Yet even in this magical world few pause to ask the deeper questions. What are these spirits really? Why do only some wizards return as ghosts while others pass beyond? The official line, as explained by Professor Binns, himself a ghost, having simply died in his sleep and continued teaching the next day, is that becoming a ghost is a choice. But what kind of choice leads someone to such a half-life? What grief, fear, or regret could bind a soul to the earthly realm, unable or unwilling to cross the mysterious veil of death? Dumbledore once said, "Ghosts are imprints of the departed, not truly aware of themselves." But is that entirely true? Nearly headless Nick seemed very aware of his beheading, of his house duties, even of his own inferiority among the real ghosts of the headless hunt. He was hurt when Sir Patrick rejected him for not being properly decapitated. That's not the behaviour of a mindless echo. That's pride, shame, and a deep longing to belong. These are traits of the living, not the dead. Helena Ravenclaw, the Grey Lady, was more than a drifting spectre. She withheld the location of Rowena Ravenclaw's diadem from generations of headmasters. She felt betrayal. She harboured secrets. She chose whom to trust. Her confession to Harry in Deathly Hallows was not mechanical. It was a moment of emotional release, tinged with centuries of pain and guilt. "He stabbed me," she whispered, describing the moment her mother's love turned to sorrow and the bloody Baron's passion into murder. These ghosts are not mere shadows, they are haunted selves, emotionally intact, consciously tormented. The bloody Baron, for instance, is cloaked in more than just spectral gloom. His silence is not from lack of thought, but from unbearable remorse. He killed the woman he loved and then himself. And yet, he didn't pass on. Why not? What guilt anchored him to Hogwarts? What force, magical or otherwise, keeps him floating among the living, refusing peace? His very presence is a contradiction. He is dead, and yet he punishes himself in eternal proximity to the scene of his greatest sin. Then there is Peeves, the poltergeist. Not a ghost by the traditional definition, but undeniably a spirit of sorts. The books tell us he wasn't ever a living person. He is, instead, a spirit of chaos, drawn to Hogwarts due to its powerful, magical energy. If the castle itself birthed him, if Hogwarts, by virtue of its magic and history, generates spiritual residue, then what else might it be hiding? How many other echoes, forgotten and invisible, might linger in its walls? The Ministry of Magic, for all its obsession with order and regulation, has remarkably little to say about ghosts. There are no licenses, no department for spectral affairs. Ghosts seem to exist outside the system. That in itself is suspicious. Why are ghosts not asked for testimony in trials, especially if they were witnesses? Why are they not counted in census reports or protected under magical creature laws? Why are they not seen as citizens, despite living in the castle, helping students, and having opinions? Professor Binns is a tragic example, a history teacher forgotten by the living and ignored by the dead. He drones through dates and battles, yet none of the students ask, what does it feel like to be dead? He never volunteers it either, as if trapped in a loop, avoiding the truth. Was it denial that made him stay? Did he even realize he had died? Or is that exactly the terrifying truth? Ghosts may not always know they're ghosts. In Order of the Phoenix, nearly headless. Nick warns Harry not to hope for contact with Sirius. He will have gone on. The phrase is vague, but heavy. It implies choice. It implies finality. Ghosts do not cross over, they stay. But who would willingly choose such an existence? It's said that wizards who fear death or feel incomplete are more likely to become ghosts, but that's not an explanation. That's a guess, a whisper in the dark. The process itself is never described in detail. What spell, what thought, what moment determines the path? Is there a ceremony? Is it instinctive? Does magic carve a pathway between life and death, and some souls simply cling to the edge? We know from the resurrection stone that shades can be called, but those aren't true ghosts. They are conjured memories, and the ghosts of Hogwarts are not conjured. They are independent. They choose where to float. They remember birthdays. They carry grudges. If magic allows for such phenomena, why hasn't it been studied properly? Perhaps it has. Perhaps those findings were buried, too dangerous for the world to see. What if ghosts hold knowledge lost to time? What if the Bloody Baron remembers spells from the early days of Hogwarts? What if the Grey Lady can recall conversations with Salazar Slytherin? What if, deep within their half-life, lies wisdom no wizard alive can match? And still, we treat them as novelties. We throw food through them at feasts, laugh when they glide through the soup. We attend the death day party of nearly headless Nick like it's a theme night at the Leaky Cauldron. But ghosts are not entertainment. They are the magical world's blind spot. And perhaps that is by design. To acknowledge them fully would be to admit that death is not the end, that the soul can resist the call beyond. That has implications too dangerous to ignore. Take moaning Myrtle, forever trapped in the bathroom where she died. She's not just a ghost, she's a victim, bullied, ignored, and finally killed by the basilisk under Tom Riddle's control. Why hasn't the Ministry interviewed her about Tom's appearance? Why didn't Dumbledore use legilimency or magical interrogation? Myrtle could have provided vital clues, but instead she was left to haunt toilets and terrify first years. Even Myrtle's emotions are complex. She giggles, flirts with Harry, weeps uncontrollably, sulks. These are not the actions of a shade, they are the behaviors of a teenager, frozen in time. She remains the same girl she was the moment she died. Her growth stopped, but her suffering didn't. Her loneliness is palpable, so why is she ignored? Could ghosts teach, learn, be healed? We know Binns teaches, but he does not learn. He is on autopilot. But what if someone broke the cycle? What if a ghost was given purpose, access to books, to companionship? Could they evolve? Could they regain some form of life? Or is that line never to be crossed? The implications reach deeper. If ghosts retain memory, emotion, and personality, then they are more than phantoms. They are pieces of soul. But that raises another question. How is this not Horcrux territory? Tom Riddle split his soul intentionally. Ghosts, too, are fragments of soul. Are they safer because they are natural? Or is this another dangerous boundary, one that no one wants to admit exists? The magical world is built on boundaries, life and death, human and creature, past and present. But ghosts defy all of them. They are proof that the line is not a line but a mist. They linger in the spaces we pretend not to see. And perhaps that's what makes them so unsettling. Because if ghosts are real, if they truly are conscious, intelligent remnants of the dead, then death is no longer mystery, it is choice. And that terrifies even the bravest wizard. So we ignore them. We leave them to haunt portraits, bathrooms, and towers. We let them float quietly through history, while we pretend they are merely side notes. But one day, someone will ask the right question, someone will demand answers, and when they do, the ghosts of Hogwarts may finally speak, not just in whispers, but in truth. Number 28, Wand and its Choice. In the dusty, dimly lit shop of Ollivanders, where thousands of boxes lined the shelves like the tombs of ancient knowledge, something extraordinary always happened. It was here that the phrase, "the wand chooses the wizard," took on the weight of prophecy. A child could enter that room, heart pounding with anticipation, and leave minutes later holding a slim piece of wood that seemed to hum with a life of its own. But few stopped to ask what that actually meant. What occurred in the flicker of the wand's choice? Garrick Ollivander, the most respected wandmaker in Britain, often repeated the phrase as if it were self-explanatory. Yet behind those words lies one of the greatest mysteries of magical theory. When Harry Potter walked into Ollivanders for the first time, he had no idea he would walk out with a holly wand, 11 inches, with a phoenix feather core. He didn't choose it. He didn't even know what it meant to hold a wand. But when he grasped it, something surged through him, light, warmth, sparks. It responded, accepted, almost recognized him. And not just any phoenix feather, this was from Fawkes, the same phoenix who had given only one other feather. That wand belonged to Tom Riddle. Why did the holly wand choose Harry? Was it fate, a cosmic mirror to his role in the story of light and dark? Or was there a system, deep, ancient, intelligent, that recognized in Harry's soul a resonance with its own core? Wand lore tells us that different woods and cores resonate with different personalities, temperaments, and magical gifts. Holly is known for protection and overcoming anger, often choosing wizards engaged in a spiritual battle. It is rare, like Harry's situation. The phoenix feather, known for powerful magic and independence, is equally selective. But who decides that combination? Does the wand possess consciousness, or is it simply reacting to magical stimuli? Consider Ron Weasley's first wand, a hand-me-down of ash and unicorn hair. It worked for a while, but never quite aligned with him. When it snapped, In the Chamber of Secrets, Ron was forced to replace it. His new wand, Willow, 14 inches, again with a unicorn hair, fit better, more attuned to his insecurities and inner loyalty. Wandwood matters, but even more, the harmony between the wand and its user shapes the magic. The wand does not simply cast, it channels, amplifies, adapts. The idea of harmony is important. Hermione Granger, known for her intellect and fierce moral compass, wields a vinewood wand, 10 3/4 inches, with dragon heartstring. Vinewood, long associated with seekers of truth and intuition, matched her thirst for knowledge. Dragon heartstring is powerful and learns quickly, yet Hermione is a muggle-born. She had no wizarding legacy to guide the wand's choice. Still, the wand chose her, not her lineage, nor her background. This complicates the idea that wands are tools. They appear instead to be judges. There's an example even more perplexing. Draco Malfoy's wand, hawthorn and unicorn hair. Hawthorn is a wood of paradox, often associated with wizards who are conflicted or struggling with internal issues. Unicorn hair adds loyalty but is the least prone to powerful dark magic. Draco, raised with pure blood ideals, ends up with a wand symbolizing internal struggle and purity. It's not what you'd expect for a Malfoy. So again, who's really choosing? The wand, the boy, or some deeper intersection between soul and object? Then comes the question of transfer. In the climactic moment in Malfoy Manor, Harry disarms Draco, but something more than physical control occurs. Draco's wand, in a moment, both silent and revolutionary, accepts Harry. It performs spells for him, strong ones without resistance. This was not just about having it in hand. As Ollivander later explains, when you win a wand, it often changes allegiance, but often is not always. This introduces ambiguity. Can allegiance be forced? What does winning even mean? A duel? A theft? An emotional conquest? Harry never kills Draco. He disarms him. Yet the wand shifts loyalty. Voldemort, who had no understanding of this nuance, never realizes that the Elder Wand will not fully serve him because it has bent toward Harry. Even a wand as ancient and powerful as the Elder Wand, you, with a thestral tail hair core, obeys this principle. Not blood, not power, allegiance. The Elder Wand exposes the deepest truths of wand lore. It does not merely perform magic, it demands loyalty, mastery, perhaps even moral alignment. Albus Dumbledore, its previous master, was said to have been defeated by Draco, though not in combat, but disarmament. That was enough for the wand. Magic here becomes relational. It is not the power of the wizard alone, but the connection between them that dictates the wand's service. And yet is a wand alive? J.K. Rowling tells us in the Tales of Beedle the Bard and the Wandmaker's Tale that wands have preferences, reactions, even moods. Ollivander himself says, the wand chooses the wizard, it is not always clear why. This vagueness is telling. It implies something unquantifiable, something almost spiritual. A wand may be crafted by human hands, but once the wood is chosen and the core inserted, something changes. The wand becomes more. There's even mention of wands refusing to perform dark magic. Unicorn hair, in particular, is said to be the most difficult to turn toward the dark arts. Does that mean it understands ethics? Does it resist intent? If so, this is no longer just a tool, it is a partner, a mirror, perhaps even a conscience. And if that is the case, why are magical creatures not studied more closely for their influence in wandcraft? The cores themselves, phoenix feather, dragon heartstring, unicorn hair, are not inert. They are alive at the moment of extraction, and their magic is embedded in the wand forever. Phoenixes are rare, intelligent, and deeply independent. Unicorns are pure, gentle, almost divine. Dragons are fierce, volatile, and powerful. Each core retains something of the creature it came from, like a soul fragment voluntarily shared, a piece of life inside the wand. Is that what makes it alive? If so, then wandmakers are doing something profoundly intimate, binding nature to human purpose. Yet no ministry regulation fully governs wand behavior. Wands are not catalogued by temperament. They are not monitored after allegiance shifts. It's assumed that a wizard owns a wand, but what if the wand simply tolerates that ownership? A wand that chooses once may choose again. Loyalty is not eternal, it is dynamic. Even the Weasley twins, Fred and George, who used similar wands made from wood that responds well to creative and chaotic energy, seemed to reflect their tools as much as their tools reflected them. In the battle at the Department of Mysteries, their magic was precise, synchronized, deeply instinctual. Their wands behaved like extensions of their minds. But it wasn't just skill, it was synergy. And Luna Lovegood, ethereal and strange, wielded a wand of unknown make, yet her spells were fluid, graceful, and oddly effective. Did her wand match her personality, or did it mold itself over time to her unique form of seeing the world? This hints at the idea that wands grow, that they learn, that they adapt, not unlike pets or even people. Do they evolve in response to love, fear, trauma, purpose? There are records, rare ones, of twin cores. The most famous, of course, are the wands of Harry and Voldemort. Their shared phoenix feather created the priori incantatem effect. But does this mean that wands can sense each other, recognize siblings? If two wands share a core, can they communicate? Does the magic become entangled? There is no research in the wizarding world to explore this further, and that silence is deafening. Magical education rarely includes wand theory beyond the basics. Even at Hogwarts, wand lore is not a full subject. It's an elective aspect of history of magic, or studied independently by those like Dumbledore or Ollivander. This leaves a vast gap in magical understanding. Wizards trust their wands, fight with them, die for them, but know little of how or why they work. If wands are partially alive, responsive, emotional, mutable, should they be treated as sentient? Should they be studied like magical creatures? Is there a consciousness locked inside wood and core, waiting, listening, watching? Or are they fragments of consciousness like echoes triggered by matching vibrations in the soul of a wizard? The implications are unsettling. If wands can reject masters, as the Elder Wand did with Voldemort, can they rebel? Can they deceive? If a wand can prefer one wizard over another, is there potential for betrayal? The dark arts have long tried to subvert wand allegiance through force, but results are inconsistent. Bellatrix Lestrange's wand, for example, never fully accepted Hermione when stolen. Spells faltered, misfired. There was resistance. That resistance speaks volumes. If a wand can rebel, it can choose. If it can choose, it can feel. And if it can feel, then every wand is a silent observer, a passive companion to every spell, every death, every miracle. In that sense, they are living relics of every wizard's legacy.